Hi, everyone. Looks like we're just waiting on a couple people. I know Council Member Isaacson will not be here tonight. Oh, I see Council Member Schaefer, and then we'll just wait another minute or so for Council Member Mercer to get on.
Looks like we have David ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Good, how are you?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
Good, long time no see. Thanks for being here tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me to share this fun update. Not often that your utility gets to say we have a fun update.
It was Councilmember Schaefer's idea, and it was a good one at that. So
excellent.
All right, well, looks like we have all the council members that will be here tonight. So I'll go ahead and call the February 15th Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 5:31. And first on our agenda is the good of the order. So this is for comments from the council. If you have anything to bring up. Councilmember Langill.
Yes, there's something I'd like to have added to the agenda for information purposes, and it has to do with salary schedules.
Is it like an information request or?
It is an information request.
Okay, so is that something that the rest of council would want to add to the agenda tonight? And it would just be, if I'm understanding correctly, to discuss whether there's consensus with council to request information from the city?
Yes, it's my understanding that is the correct procedure we'll be using in the future.
Did you want to?
And it is information we've received in the past, so it's not new information. It's just updated information.
Okay, did you want to explain a little more like what you mean by salary schedules or what specifically you're looking for?
Yeah, if that's permitted. We have historically received salary schedules, the pay scales listed with the actual job titles. We received them in 19, 20, 21, and we projections for 2021. And so now we are at a point where we should be getting updated schedules for 2022, now that various negotiations have been completed. And along with those, what we traditionally have received is also the updated organization charts. I have those for all the past years, so that's been an ongoing practice. And then just to be specific on the salary schedules, we have received them for represented, non-represented, as well as police. So it's all three types of groups of employees. And as I said, this is what we've received in the past. This is not a unique new type of report.
Thank you. So yeah, I had a conversation with Councilmember Langill just about procedure. So the good of the order is to bring things up, observations, comments, and in order to take action, like ask something to be brought back to a future council, we need it to be an agenda item. So I just wanted her to give a little more context to what she was talking about. And if we could just, I mean, is there any objection to it being added to the agenda tonight? And Mayor, it also from you, if that's fine, if we add that to our city council agenda, it would just literally be the discussion of whether council wants this information. Does that make sense?
it does. And I think I've got a couple questions for the finance director, because I know that our salary schedules and FTEs are approved in our budget, and that is included in the budget documentation. So I just wanted to check with Director Mason on what the status of that is in a published document. And I know that that was part of the budget approval process. So that information should have already been distributed to council, but I'll let Director Mason respond to that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dana Mason, Finance Director. The mid-biennium budget adjustments included all of the salary schedules for police, non-represented and represented employees.
Would you, okay, I didn't find those in my budget materials. So maybe they're, in our internet session. Can you send us the link then to those so that we can all access those?
So Council,
Because I know they were done as part of the budget, but I also know that all our deliberations over pay increases, benefits and so forth have been changed since the budget was adopted. So that way I can go back and compare.
so Councilmember Langill, would that satisfy what you're hoping to get access to, or did you still want this to be added so we can talk about some other things?
Well,
with that?
I'm certainly willing to take a look at what
Okay.
is prepared currently, and then if it doesn't compare to before, then I can come back and ask for more information. There's another thing in the information, the request area. I previously in November asked for a couple of job descriptions. I had asked one for the new coordinator position in Public Works. I had asked for the 2 project manager job descriptions. And then I would also like for our files a copy of the new engineering job description that we're recruiting. Just the copies of what we're already using or we are using for recruitment purposes.
So City Administrator Apple, is that something that we already have that could just be distributed to council, or do we need to go ahead and add this as an agenda item to see if the entire council, if it's anything special that needs to be put together? That was my only concern.
If it's just a job description, I think Steve, if I don't know if he's on yet, Steve should have this job description, so I'd have him weigh in. But it's just a job. If it's just a job description that you want to read the job description, that should be available.
So maybe
that would be 4 job descriptions, the new engineer position that they're recruiting, the existing project manager job descriptions as approved by the union. We have to make sure that we're looking at what the union has is part of the union agreement. And then also the new coordinator position for over there, stormwater.
Since it sounds like those are things we probably already have, maybe then I can just make sure offline that does come out and get distributed to everybody. If there's anything above and beyond that, then I think it'd be appropriate to add an agenda item. So it sounds like we could just go ahead and do that offline and make sure that we get that information.
Great.
Okay.
I would say a quick Google search would find the job description for the position that was recently filled and open. Those were all posted online for the public during the public announcements as well.
Thanks for that. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right, I'm not seeing anything, so we'll move on to our next item, which is the review of our regular meeting agenda, and I'll hand that over to our city administrator.
All right, if we can pull up the meeting agenda. I don't know, unless everybody wants to just look on their own meeting agenda. What we like to do is just walk over what the regular council meeting is going to have, so we make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to have mayor's report. She's going to talk about the legislative update and where we're at with the different legislative agenda items in Olympia. Our fire district 45 is going to give their monthly report. Police department is going to give their report that was asked for by council. Then we got the committee reports, and we do have a fourth quarter financial report, as well as my report, fourth quarter financial report. And then also, what was the other thing we had on it? A little bit of talk from both Laura and from Steve about the wastewater treatment plant, where we're at with the upgrade. And then Laura's got a portion of mine to talk about as well. And I don't think we have anything that we're asking to go to consent that would need that's out of the ordinary. So there's not really any other items that we're asking to get moved forward. So Laura's going to talk about Eastlink Connection Survey and engagement, community engagement. But this is also where we'd be talking about putting things on consent if it's something, so to make sure that before we start the meeting would be, but this time I don't think we have anything going on consent.
Okay. So I guess we could just go ahead and move on then. Just want to welcome David Hoffman from Puget Sound Energy. and he's going to be giving us a presentation, The Future of Energy. So just welcome to our meeting, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. So Sarah told me that I could share my screen, so I'm going to do that. Make sure I choose the right screen to share here. And all right, can you all see this slide right here?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to join your meeting tonight to share an update on what Puget Sound Energy is preparing for, how we're planning for the future, and what the future of energy in our state and really our region looks like. I want to thank Councilmember Schaefer for an excellent conversation about a week and a half ago where we went over a lot of this, and that seemed to generate interest with him to invite me in to share this with all of you. So I will, recognizing what time it is and that you all have a very full agenda, I will keep this as short as I can. So it's going to be very content heavy, but here we go. So let's see. So what I want to share tonight really is two things. It's our Beyond Net Zero Carbon Pledge, which we announced in January of 2021, which incorporates what the state law change with in 2019 under the Clean Energy Transformation Act, all of the provisions of that act, as well as a number of goals that we have established as a company for our own operations and for our customers moving forward to get to the point where by 2045, we will be, our goal is to be a beyond net zero carbon company. So including our natural gas system and including our electric system and our operations, we want to be beyond net zero. This is a statement that our president and CEO, Mary Kipp, made as part of that announcement. And very quickly, I'll just read this. Climate change is an existential threat that cannot be ignored. And we are doing our part to move further and faster to save our planet. So I just want to share that because it's important what our leaders say. It's also much more important what our leaders do and what they deliver on. And what I can share is it is very exciting to be working for a company whose leadership has such a strong stance and is willing to lead on issues that are of this much importance. So by 2045, as I said, we desire or aspire to be a beyond net zero carbon energy company. So we believe that we can, our energy, the energy that we provide, can not only slow climate change, but help reduce it or reverse it. We can reduce our own carbon emissions to net zero as a company and go beyond by helping other sectors enable carbon reduction across the state of Washington. And this, as I said, will encompass our entire energy supply, both electric and natural gas. So we have three pathways to get beyond net zero carbon. That's eliminating or getting to net zero carbon emissions for all of our operations and our electric supply by 2030, and getting to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2045. Next is on the natural gas side, that is the sales directly to our customers. We want to reduce customer end-use carbon emissions by 30% by 2030 and get to net zero carbon emissions for customer end-use emissions by 2045. And finally, beyond net zero, this is the beyond that I keep saying is we want to help other sectors reduce their carbon emissions. So we want to aggressively expand our electric vehicle charging station program, use our new liquefied natural gas plant in Tacoma to help reduce emissions from marine and long haul trucking. We are currently investing in renewable natural gas and hydrogen, as well as being open to other low carbon fuels that may not even be created yet. And then reducing our upstream methane emissions in our distribution or natural gas distribution system to net zero. And that is a goal that we have set for this year, actually. So by the end of 22, our goal is to be net zero on our methane leaks in our distribution system. So as I mentioned, those 3 pillars, the interim steps that we have for each of these pillars, as I like to call them, because the first pillar is the net zero operations and electric supply by 2030. So we will be removing coal power from customer rates by the end of 2025. That was part of the Clean Energy Transformation Act law that went into effect in 2019, and that we were very much involved in those discussions and negotiations with the governor's office and the legislature to make sure that that bill took all of our customers' concerns into account. We also must invest in new utility scale solar and wind projects. We're aggressively expanding DERs, or distributed energy resources. Those include rooftop solar, community solar, and local storage. In the second pillar, or as part of the second pillar, we aspire to achieve net zero carbon emissions from our natural gas system, as I said. Eliminating methane leaks from our distribution system by the end of this year, as I already said. We are researching and investing in renewable natural gas and clean hydrogen projects. We're currently conducting a hydrogen pilot at our Georgetown facility in South Seattle to learn how this clean fuel can be incorporated into our system. We are supporting, or we did support, carbon pricing at the state level. That is putting a price on carbon emissions to drive reductions in those emissions. Energy efficiency and targeted electrification will be a key part of this goal. So that would include ideas like hybrid heat pumps or hybrid heat pump systems that can dramatically and immediately reduce natural gas use while reducing the amount of electric infrastructure necessary to meet our region's needs, and responsibly utilizing the existing pipeline infrastructure that our customers have already invested in. And then finally, down here is the beyond net zero, as I mentioned before. So those steps will include supporting low and zero carbon emitting vehicle infrastructures, seeking partnerships on biological or engineered carbon sequestration projects, maximizing forest offsets on PSE owned lands, completing, as I said, our liquefied natural gas plant in Tacoma to help reduce emissions from maritime vessels and long haul trucking, and developing and expanding PSE owned EV charging station program throughout our service territory. So reversing climate change requires partnership across all sectors. We know this, you all know this. And so we look forward to working with our customers as we embark on reducing emissions by this amount. It is a substantial lift, and we are excited to share that we have submitted our first clean energy implementation plan, which is one of the requirements of the Clean Energy Transformation Act, that was filed with the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission on December 17th, 2021. And what this CEIP, the Clean Energy Implementation Plan, does is it outlines PSE's path to creating a better energy future for our customers and neighbors across the region. The strategies for the next 4 years include moving PSE forward to 63% clean electricity by the end of 2025, up from 59% in the draft plan, which had been submitted back in August, and 34% clean in 2020. Accelerating efforts toward meeting our clean energy goals for 2030 and 2045. As I had already said, we will be removing coal as a source of electricity from our grid by the end of 2025. We'll be ramping up utility scale clean and renewable electricity resources like large scale wind and solar generation, reaching all the way out, I will say, to eastern Montana to access that new clean energy. Collaborating with our customers to nearly double the installation of distributed energy resources such as solar and battery storage programs. So that's, again, that rooftop solar. We want to double that those installations over the next 4 years. We want to create more ways for customers to save energy and reduce costs through energy efficiency improvements and new energy efficiency programs. Again, we want to introduce new programs and incentives to reduce or shift energy use during peak times. That will dramatically reduce the need for further investment in electric infrastructure. And then ensuring clean energy transition benefits are distributed equitably toward achieving a more inclusive carbon-free future. So the plan includes a robust public participation process in energy planning that strengthens community ties and creates solutions that reflect those goals. Since April of last year, 2021, we've engaged with PSE customers, community-based organizations, and advisory groups, including our new equity advisory group, to inform this CEIP. Most recently, we conducted a public comment period from October 18th to November 12th, with an emphasis on reaching historically underrepresented populations, resulting in more than 350 comments from across our service territory. Comments received included increasing our interim clean electricity target and continually pursuing ways to broaden clean electricity access for customers of all ethnicities and income levels, ensuring all customers benefit from the clean energy transition. This is the first of many plans that PSE will be working on and delivering for our customers in the coming decades. This plan is now under review by the UTC, the Utilities and Transportation Commission. And as our regulator, they will conduct their own public comment period. And I strongly encourage the city of Duvall and your residents to comment on this plan. We very much want our customers' perspective on this. So we have a number of bill assistance programs that we've implemented, and I won't belabor this point. I'm happy to talk about this if you have further questions. But suffice it to say, we have assisted our customers throughout our service territory to the tune of $59 million over the last 2 years. Much of those resources were just directly credited towards accounts that we knew these folks needed help. This KCAP 2.0 is our crisis affected customer assistance program. And what we saw right out of the gate when the pandemic hit was that our customers were going to need help. We knew that they were going, many of our customers were already struggling, especially in this region with incredible home value increases and cost of living increases over the last several years. When the economy did what it did due to the pandemic, we responded by committing, before we were required to by the state or by our utility regulator, we committed to not turning anybody's power off during the pandemic due to lack of payment or anything like that. So we also suspended any late fees as well. And in addition to that, again, we went through and eliminated a number of past due balances for income eligible customers. So that is some of what we're trying to do. So here's some of the details on this. I will provide this slide deck to Sarah after this, so you all can go back through here. And if you have any further questions about this, again, I'm happy to work on answers for you. So that is my presentation tonight. Again, I wanted to keep it as short as I could and leave room for questions. So here is my contact information down here. That is my cell phone. So if you need to reach me, please reach out on my cell or my email. And these are the corporate Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube pages. With that, I will stop sharing. And how do I do this here? Okay, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I will turn it over. Council, do you have any questions? I see Council Member Schaefer. Let's start with you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. First of all, not really any questions for David. I had the opportunity to get a lot of answers from him a few weeks ago when we talked. But one of the things I wanted David to come present what Puget Sound Energy was doing and planning for the future, because there's good, exciting things going on there. But even there's a bigger picture that we, the council, need to be aware of. And that's, we're on the verge of a major change here. And it's not necessarily obvious yet. It's perhaps been delayed a little bit by COVID and other things. But the reality is we're going to switch over fast and furious from fossil fuels to electricity. That means our vehicles. And right now, EVs, electric vehicles, are a small percentage of new car sales. That's going to quickly change. We're going to see within the next few years, certainly within the next decade, the majority of new vehicles on the road will be electric, not fossil fuel driven. We're going to see our changes in our own buildings, in our own homes and businesses, where fossil fuels are either no longer used at all or used to a very minimal respect. And heat pumps will take over what what we currently use for heating. Again, heat pumps are of course use electricity for their energy. And going forward, we're going to see highly efficient energy production, electric energy production, as, believe it or not, although some people are still naysayers, but fusion will eventually take hold, and we will have sustainable, safe, long-term electric production. That being said, we still need Puget Sound Energy not only to produce electricity, but to distribute it to us. So their role is going to be here for a very long time. But I'm not talking about decades in the future. I'm talking about within the next decade, maybe even within the next 5 years, we're going to see these changes. So it will pay for us in Duvall to accommodate the changes, welcome the changes, encourage the changes as they come, and support the regulatory structure that encourages cleaner, carbon-free energy. Sorry, that's my spiel. I'm done.
Thank you. Councilmember Mercer.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Schaefer actually touched on two of the points I was going to ask about. I think anyone who watched the Super Bowl sort of saw that transition to EV front and center in terms of the number of ads around charging stations, electric vehicles. It's really been sort of an inflection point over the last probably 3 to 6 months. But the second part of my question was really around, I think you touched on it, was around the distribution and the investments in infrastructure. There's obviously the cutover in terms of the production, but with whether it's Build Back Better, whether it's just aging infrastructure in general, we're in an area that historically, has, although it's been much improved over the last couple of years, but saw the adverse effects of windstorms and on infrastructure. And I'd love to learn a little bit more, not necessarily in today's call, given the time, but to really understand a little bit better how PSE is both investing in the broader community infrastructure, but also that infrastructure within the home to assure distribution, whether it's powering EVs or the additional capacity needs of those heat pumps and other resources, because there's obviously a public-private partnership there and partnership that would be required from the city to implement those changes. So thank you.
That's great. And if I may, I'll say I would love to either come back to this, the full council, and give an update on that, or talk offline with anybody about that. That's a very expansive question, I will say, because there's a lot of investment that needs to be made. And if I may, I will say, when it comes to infrastructure projects, in particular electric infrastructure, few folks want to see the infrastructure itself, and that always drives us to the conversation of undergrounding and the increased costs related to that. But it also comes down to local interest and neighborhood preservation, and recognizing that folks in Duvall or Carnation or Snoqualmie or Redmond may have a perspective on the investments that your utility should be making. And we may want to make an investment in a particular project, but the community in which that project, and I'm speaking specifically related to generation right now, but the communities in which those facilities are being proposed and will be built, they also have those same perspectives when it comes to neighborhood preservation and character and all of that. And I think I bring that up because, quite frankly, I also cover Eastern Washington for the company. And I always tell my friends in elected office in Eastern Washington that I will bring this up to my friends in Western Washington when I'm talking to them, that nobody wants to see this infrastructure. So we all have to give and take when it comes to these projects. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Naplin?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great presentation. For some reason, I had gone down a rabbit trail of figuring out where does our electricity come from. And recently I discovered that 31% of Puget Sound Energy's electricity actually is converted from natural gas. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of energy loss when that conversion occurs. And I'm just trying to understand, if we're converting to electricity, all of these things. And, I currently love that I have a gas stove and a gas furnace because the power goes out and I'm set. If I switch to electricity, what's my situation? And plus I'm on electricity and I'm burning natural gas somewhere at a huge efficiency loss. Sure. And so I'm just trying to understand. I think this is a move that needs to happen. I'm just trying to understand short term, at what cost is this going to be to the ratepayer? Right. And are we a little ahead of a lot of these conversions when we're inefficiently converting natural gas to generate this electricity? So I mean, this is a larger conversation, but I think if you talk to a lot of people that live out here, we want the reliability of power. Natural gas is more reliable here, and also really big concerns about the cost of energy and all of these things. I just saw that there's a proposal to have quite a substantial rate increase that's being asked for. Yep. It looks like primarily for investments in renewable energy. And so, I understand the long-term goal. Short-term, I feel like seems a little painful.
Yeah, well, and excuse me, I agree. We agree. In the end, I would love to have an offline conversation with you about the interplay of the natural gas system with the electric system, because I think I'm fascinated by it myself. And I also think it is a productive conversation to have, because the two systems, especially in our region, we're far enough north where those systems really complement each other well. If you're in California, the need to have natural gas for heating is almost a moot point unless you're up in the mountains. And most folks, if you're in California and you have natural gas, you use it to cook, not necessarily heat space, or maybe heat water, but not space heating as much. Here, we have a young system that it has been kept up really well, and we are going to reach our goal of getting to net zero methane leaks from our distribution system by the end of this year. So if we can partner the natural gas system with the electric system, utilizing heat pumps as well as natural gas as a backup, then those extremely cold days that we just got one a month ago, where it was cold for about a week. And the natural gas in that case can kick in and help support the system overall and help reduce the amount of infrastructure we need to build in order to have the robust system that we need to keep the lights on. I hope that starts to answer your question, but I would love to have more of a conversation with you.
Thank you. Any other council members wanted to comment or ask a question? Oh, go ahead, Mayor. Sorry, not to exclude you.
Oh, thank you. And this is just a comment and a thank you. You know, Mr. Hoffman has been with PSE probably what, 7 or 8 years now? Is that about right?
4.
And 5, okay. You know, time.
It seems
time
longer,
hard to
but
keep
yeah,
track.
yeah.
We've had a lot going on in that time. And one thing that
Yes.
I want to say and share with our community and the council is that every time an event has arisen or a storm has been projected, Mr. Hoffman has been on point, reaching out to administration at the city and keeping us in the loop with everything that they know is going on. And also getting us answers when we've had some more extended power outages in certain areas to try and get information to our community. And has really done a good job doing the best he can in his position to make sure our community is served well. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And as you can see, PSE has a huge portfolio, and he not only deals with the west side of the state, but the eastern side as well. And the fact that he does as well as he does, communicating with us as one person is pretty amazing. And I'm very thankful for that service here in Duvall. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure, and I really I approach this job, and quite frankly, the organization I work for, PSE, approaches all of these conversations and every storm season. And now we're starting to see summer become part of the storm season, given the heat dome last year. But we approach it as a partnership. We see this as a partnership. We can't do what we need to do without your help, and vice versa. So let's keep that going. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that and say, I mean, I could even look at my email right now, type in your name, and I mean, there's at least 1 email per month, usually 2 though. Anytime something's going on, there's an email communicating. Communication is huge, and it's been just really spot on. So we all really appreciate that. And with that, I'll just thank you again for coming and presenting all this information. I'm sure people will follow up if they have more questions, or we'd probably love to have you back as well and follow up on some of those other topics. So with that, of course, you're welcome to stay on, but you probably have other things you want to do with your night. So we'll say good night to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much. Bye-bye.
All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on. Mayor, were you ready? If we move on to the state legislative redistricting and representation, did you want to present on or talk about that now?
I'm happy to. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm not as used to sharing screens, so if I need to reshare a screen, please let me know if you're not seeing what I'm describing up on the camera. So right now you should see, this is the current, can you see, is my screen sharing at this point?
Yes.
Good. So you should see what our current boundary is. This is from the state legislative website. We are currently in the 5th or 45th legislative district, and to the east and south of us is the 5th legislative district. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here to kind of give you an idea of how the 45th goes, not just around Duvall, but in the surrounding areas, all the way out to the Cherry Creek Falls trailhead. Last week on, I believe is the 8th of February, the legislature approved the final redistricting maps, which changes our borders significantly. And that means that the city of Duvall will actually be very close to the 12th legislative district. And I'm going to zoom in here. Can you see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so we're, let's see, nope, that is 45th. Okay, I apologize. The maps that I'm now showing are the new maps, and they're ArcGIS and not in the PDF format that makes it easier to go in and out. So with this, if you look at the border of Duvall, you can see a significant shift. So the dark black line is now where the 12th legislative district starts, which you'll notice includes Arnuga, our future annexation area. So at this point, with the maps approved by the legislature, this upcoming election and every election therefore for the next 10 years, these will be our legislative district boundaries. And so if in the next 10 years, for example, the NUGA ends up coming into the city of Duvall, they will have different representation than the rest of our citizens, which is a very unique situation since it is kind of an island annexation area. I'm going to go out a little bit and just start to try and give a little bit of perspective of how large the 12th legislative district is. So if you look as I'm moving to the right, you go east of Duvall, you go up to the north of Monroe, south to Issaquah, across the mountains, all the way east to Leavenworth and East Wenatchee, up to Chelan, almost to Okanagan County. And this does populate a little slow. So these legislators are now going to be representing, I think they have to drive 200 miles from one end to the district to another. And so I wanted to give just kind of a good look at that. And if you look at this map right here, this is the current 12th legislative district. Currently, it goes up to the Canadian border, up through Winthrop and Mazama, east to Cooley Dam and Electric City, and south to Quincy. So this is going to be a huge shift for this area, and it means that many of the residents that consider Duvall their home city, even though they're not in the city, will actually be represented by legislators that are currently in Eastern Washington. So you can see we have Senator Brad Hawkins. Those of us that have been able to participate in Snoqualmie Valley Governments Association have met some of these folks already. Senator Hawkins hails from East Wenatchee. He has a background from the school board and worked for a public utility for many years. And then there's Representative Keith Gaynor. He's based out of Dryden, which is in between Leavenworth and Wenatchee. And he comes to the legislature with, I believe it was 12 years as a Chelan County Commissioner before being elected to the legislature. And then you have Representative Mike Steele, who is a former City of Chelan City Council member, former legislative staffer in Olympia. That's where he and I first met many, many years ago. And he is now representing this area as well. I think I've got the 45th, the current 45th up as well. So the current 45th legislative district obviously comes into Duvall. And you can see just the massive shifts. And these shifts were really based on demographics and trying to get equity as far as population, trying to keep jurisdictions together, and trying to be as nonpartisan as possible. For those on council that are not aware, Washington State has a bipartisan redistricting commission. You have 2 members from the Republican side, 2 members from the Democratic side, and a neutral chair. So you really have, definitely for the most part, you're able to skip the politics and gerrymandering. And what does happen is that each of the commissioners submits their maps, and they continue to work together and work with the GIS systems to try and create as balanced of districts as possible. So I'm scrolling back in here to the 45th legislative district, and what you will see here is that this changes dramatically. And so many things are going to shift. I think we're going to see significant shift in representation in the legislature throughout the state. And time will really tell how that all plays out and plays together. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now. One thing of note, and I think we may have mentioned it previously in another meeting, is that technically there are rules for these legislators on when they can truly interact with us as they take on their new districts. So it should, for us, it should be really around the filing time for the upcoming elections, but the maps are really effective now. And so we're going to have a little bit of weirdness when it comes to reaching out to the 12th district and what have you. But as soon as their restrictions are over and session is over and they've had some time to adjust, I do hope to invite them out for a day, take them around our city and that portion of the district that they're not familiar with, as well as arrange hopefully a lunch or something for everyone to get together and just get to know them a little better. My suspicion is, just looking based on the maps of over the last 2 cycles of redistricting, that that the 12th district may, expand even further into Duvall in the next cycle, depending on the population base. And so besides that potential shift, I also feel it's really important for all of us to build as good of relationships that we can with them. In speaking with Representative Gaynor in particular, we're able to identify a lot of similarities with some of the issues that the cities in the current 12th district deal with and the cities that are in the new 12th district on the west side deal with. So talking with others, I think with legislative and city electeds, we're really feeling like this could be a great opportunity to work together and start to bridge some of that east-west divide that exists in Olympia, and hopefully move towards more balanced policies and understanding across the Cascade Crest in the future. So that's what I had for that. Just wanted to give you guys an update. It's official now, so our strategy shifts and we start moving that direction. And I think ultimately it's a good thing for our area and a good thing for the state, the way our districts have shifted, and I'm looking forward to working with these new set of legislators.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna go ahead and ask if we can maybe hopefully just hold any comments or questions, because I want to make sure we stay on track, and we're just running a tiny little bit behind, and that's my job, right? Always stressing on the agenda and the time limits. But thank you for that. That's a great update, and that's something that everyone I know is really interested in. So going on to our next item, I think, there's a request if we could possibly move to item 5 and then jump back to item 3, 4, and then 6. So if Director Thomas, is Acela on now?
Good evening, Mayor and Council and Mayor Pro Tem. She is actually she is right now, and I thank you. Yeah, because I wasn't sure if we were going to get to everything, and I didn't want to keep her for council. Yeah,
I know this one's super important. So we're going to go ahead and be on item 5, which is the autonomous delivery robot presentation with Acela Chavez.
Hello, good evening. Acela Chavez, Assistant Planner Permit Specialist for the record. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, tonight I'm gonna provide an overview of an emerging topic, autonomous delivery robots. And I will share with you some of the characteristics of this new technology, some regulatory considerations, and some examples of other jurisdictions that have dealt with this emerging technology. So autonomous delivery robots are referred to with many names. Self-driving package delivery robots, autonomous delivery vehicles, sidewalk delivery robots, personal delivery devices, and autonomous mobile robots. Due that this is a very new innovation, there are many names that you can find them on. Here in Washington State, they are commonly referred as personal delivery devices, PDD. This is one of the most common ones. Some of the characteristics is that these robots weigh about 50 pounds. They can carry about 22 pounds or something about 3 bags of groceries. They are battery powered. They can travel 4 miles on a full charge. And their average speed is 4 miles per hour. In general, they are considered not noisy. The potential benefits of having delivery robots, according to some of them, according to some of the reading, is that the elderly can have assistance getting deliveries. This can be medicine or groceries. Just thinking about the current pandemic, this is one of the opportunities that we can have. There's also time efficiency and reduction of trucks on the streets, the use of fuel, gasoline, diesel. For some of these freight companies, it's an affordable option. This represents 40% on savings. That's an estimate. You can also reduce the number of vehicle accidents if they are programmed correctly, because they are mainly on the sidewalk. You are basically taking vehicles off the road. So that's a good thing. And this also represents a new education and community opportunity for youth that are interested in probably STEM or robotics. So it's another added benefit. Some of the regulatory considerations for delivery robots is their operation and maintenance. Who is managing those? Who are taking care of this? Also the service area. Sometimes we have routes, or we have some districts, we have neighborhoods. Also the fleet size. A company might have 3 delivery robots in the city, or they can have 20. This is very common in campuses, for example, in colleges, to have a big fleet and just have delivery robots coming and going all the time. Some of the safety precautions, it's the visibility for the robot, some warning noises that they have. There are some braking requirements, weight limits, and speed limits. And yeah, just in general, the robots are legalized in Arizona, Florida, Idaho, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Utah, Virginia, some of these states. There was a pilot program in Snohomish County in 2019. It was one of the first in the nation. So we're very close to them. Here in Washington State, the bill 1325 in 2019 regulated personal delivery devices. So they can travel faster than 6 miles per hour. They can exceed 120 pounds before they are loaded. They can only cross the street at sidewalks. They can be tracked with a unique ID number. This is very helpful for the company. They must be monitored and controlled by an operator. There is this fleet supervisor that has access to the robots, and they can help them remotely to navigate the streets. They also need to belong to a business with an insurance. They always need to yield to pedestrians and bikes, and of course have effective brakes and lights. The way that these fleets are brought to the cities and usually to residential areas is through dispensers, is one of the options. They are used to store and deploy the robots. They are just like a big container. They're typically 5 to 20 feet in length, 10 feet in width, and 8 to 10 feet in height. So this is around 150 square feet in area. They might present some zoning challenges in terms of the size, the use, the storage, and the location. Due that usually they look to be located at residential areas to be close to the customers, and many of the zoning regulations do not support this type of structures. These type of structures usually go into the industrial areas, so there might be some challenges there. Other considerations, the architectural design. Maybe these containers don't go with the character of the neighborhood. So that's something to consider. Some sign regulations. Maybe this might look like an advertisement for a certain company. Hours of operation. Are they 24 hours or do they have a set schedule? And also just the dispenser related noise and parking. Maybe some of these dispensers are looking to go into already installed parking areas, so they might take some of spaces. And just very briefly, some examples. San Francisco was one of the first cities to heavily regulate personal delivery robots. They have permit to operate on city sidewalks for research and testing. They have time limits for the operation. Each company can have up to 3 autonomous delivery vehicles, and they are restricted to a certain zoning district. They need to be located on private property. City has to be there to observe the testing process. And just the considerations that we also have in Washington, they need to yield to other vehicles and pedestrians, and they have a speed limit of 3 miles per hour. Madison, Wisconsin, their contribution was limiting the operation of the robots on predetermined routes in certain sidewalks. So that's how these were programmed. And the routes were approved by the Transportation Commission. In DC, the requirements from the city included data sharing with local government and agencies. Just in general, having the number of deliveries, time, the distances, and very importantly, the collisions and any incidents. So all the data from so this was just like an overview in what will be next steps for the city of Duvall. Draft a policy with the assistance of the city attorney. This is the staff recommendation. Also having an interim policy for 6 months while we create a final policy. This will be presented with Planning Commission and then this committee for review. And seeking regional policy with other communities in the Seattle metro area and the Valley. Just to have something that we can regulate here in the city of Duvall. So I'm gonna share this presentation with our city clerk. And you have some resources there and examples of other bills from the cities that were presented. So yeah, if you have any questions, Director Thomas and I, we are here to answer. And I will stop sharing my screen right now.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, and I really appreciate you including your sources as well. That's always just great to follow up. So I think we have time for a quick go around. If you guys have burning questions, go ahead, Councilmember Mercer.
Yeah, I don't necessarily need responses, but would love it. A couple of things came to mind as you were walking through the presentation, and it may be covered in the supplemental materials, but things like DoorDash and Uber Eats, food deliveries, if there's any specific regulations or alcohol delivery. So just in terms of content-based restrictions, but the one that sort of came top of mind was around privacy considerations. A lot of the autonomous vehicles use cameras, and you know, if there needs to be additional entering private property, recording things, it doesn't necessarily, again, need to be answered in this call, but if there's a specific resource or a link that you could include, I would love to learn a little bit more about how municipalities and cities are dealing with those concerns.
I will,
Oh, go ahead, Director.
we have written those questions down. One of the reasons why we're here and are looking towards an interim policy is because we're on the forefront in this region. There's not a city, I believe there's one city, the city of Everett, that has their first policy out. So we're short on policy work, but yes, we will look at the cameras and then obviously like medicine and alcohol and privacy issues. That's a really good question.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Sorry. Yeah, anyway, so thank you very much for the presentation. I think these are fascinating. I actually saw one in Duvall. Now, I think it was being accompanied by somebody. I couldn't tell for sure, but it was driving down the sidewalk. So I don't know what kind of test was going on or whatever, but it was here in Duvall. But which was the first one that I'd ever seen, by the way. So that was cool. Let's see, a couple of questions you may or may not know the answers for. The dispensers, the container size dispensers. I assume those are permanent. Do you know if that's true or not? It's not like a movable or easily movable structure?
They would technically be permitted likely as a temporary type use because it is a container, so it could come on and off the site. But I'm assuming that it would be permanently located there for a certain amount of time, potentially as an accessory use to another business.
Sure, that's what it looked like. So thank you. And the other question, again, we may not know the answers, but as many of us dog walkers or just walkers know, around town there are not sidewalks everywhere. Which in general, I certainly don't mind personally, but it sounds like these might be restricted from driving on those streets. I'm wondering about that, how that would work, or maybe we could, allow them to drive down the street or whatever. But for our town in the current state, at least, that's something we would need to consider.
That's another really good question, and we're going to continue to gather information, but our understanding of reading of the law is that they're allowed anywhere where a pedestrian is allowed, and there are plenty of areas where pedestrians go that are on our roadways towards the shoulder.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hoag.
Thank you. So thank you, Acela. I appreciate your presentation. I just wanted to kind of mention a few things that came to mind, but I'm not expecting answers. I just think that it's something to think about if we're doing policy work. I'm wondering if we can, because it says that the insurance only has to be $100,000, but I'm wondering if we as a city can request the insurance liability to be higher. That was a question I had. And then I'd like to know, like, where would they be placing these containers? I mean, shouldn't we have some regulation of where they can be placed? And
that's a really great question. We talked a little bit about this in land use committee. Just so everybody knows, we had a brief discussion at land use committee, and we would have to decide as a community what zones they potentially should, belong in, like industrial, commercial. How close do you want them to a residential zone? So those are all the things that we would be evaluating during the policy making process.
And not policy related, but I'm just kind of curious how they're monitored. I would love to know more. And I mentioned this in land use too, but thank you so much again for the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, Director Thomas, I would add, I'd be curious about, if it can be deemed like they could only operate during daylight hours, or like if that's a possibility at all, or if they can't be restricted in that way. I know, Acela, you had mentioned they need to have operating like brakes and lights and things like that, but I'm just thinking about, are they reflective? Are they, could you see these things at night, especially in areas if they don't have sidewalks? And then on the dispenser side, just a thought, how utility boxes can be wrapped with art, maybe by a local artist. Is that something that we could do or impose and say, if we have to look at this thing all day, you need to use a local artist to design a wrap that would go on it? Just might be a fun little touch to add. Councilmember Naplin?
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Hoag brought up several items that were discussed at the Land Use Committee meeting, and I'll just throw out a couple more. There's definitely a lot of discussion about safety and how this would work, sharing a sidewalk, or, in the cases where there isn't a sidewalk, being on the roadway, and how that interaction with pedestrians and vehicles, safety issues surrounding that. I feel a little nervous about being a guinea pig on this. I'd really like to see statistics on any accidents or pedestrian issues, feedback from the communities where they have implemented these autonomous vehicle deliveries. Yeah, and one other thing that came up during the meeting was some cities, I think, have restricted it to certain routes. And I can't remember all the details about that. But anyway, our topography with the hills and the missing sidewalks, it feels like it would be pretty challenging to implement in Duvall. And so I think there were a lot of concerns about how this would actually work. Anyway.
Thank you, Councilmember Naplin. Yeah, that was a really good share from the Land Use Committee. We did talk about potentially two options to go, which is an interim policy or even I'll call it the M word. And we talked with our attorney and he recommended doing an interim ordinance because it's outright allowed by state statute. So he felt a little nervous about that. So that's why you saw the recommendation about the interim policy. We are really seeking, obviously, other communities to take this pathway with us and create an interim ordinance. I have a meeting in about a week and a half with another city to sit down with them and see if they're interested in working with us on this. And I know the mayor is even doing some outreach and exploration for us as well. Because this is really uncharted waters. There are very few cities in the state that have a program, and they are now testing these vehicles throughout the region, and they're now submitting permits to cities. So it's catching a little bit off guard, but we want to be prepared and try to create a policy that at least will work for 6 months while we're drafting a final policy.
Thank you. Councilmember Lingle, did you have anything to add on these? Okay, so with that, we're gonna bounce back to, did you? Oh, I just saw the hand. Okay, sorry. Thank you, Director Thomas, and thanks again, Estella. That was a really great presentation. We appreciate it. With that, we're gonna bounce back to item number 3, which is the Toll Brothers Phase 3 final plat with Directors Lenashevsky and Thomas.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, citizens, staff. Steve Lenashevsky, Public Works. I don't see Laura. There she is. We're not quite sure who should share what on this, but I think I have it up, so I am more than capable of sharing an updated PowerPoint here, provided by none other than Miss Laura Thomas. Let's see, one more button. Okay, I hope you can see the screen that shows a PowerPoint image.
Steve, I see a screen that says you started, but I don't actually see the PowerPoint.
My screen sharing is paused. That's fun. Well, let's try it again. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Okay, with that.
There we go.
Yeah,
yep.
I would like to lobby one complaint to Zoom. At least in Teams, it highlights like what screen you're on. So if anybody out there has any contact at Zoom, I'd like an upgrade. So thank you. So you noticed in the packet there was a PowerPoint, a packet item showing a memorandum and agreement between the city and our friends at Toll. That is an item that is put there to provide some certainties on elements relative to the property going through the final plat process. You can see here we have phases 3 and 4 of the Ridge Big Rock. Kind of dividing line is just to the east of the city parcel, which is on the corner here, and then on the edge of the park on the northeast corner, and then phase 4 ties into Glen Cairn and butts up close to the PSC power line near 275th. To the left of your screen is 3rd Avenue, to the bottom of your screen is Big Rock Road. So with that said, there are 116 units in phase 3, 90 proposed units in phase 4. In phase 3, there are 12 of the units that are the, what's the term, Laura, we're using for those?
Affordable
housing units, right? Thank you. And then, so 12 in phase 3 and 8 in phase 4. Some of the items left withstanding for the city's, I guess, consideration is the park. So we call Park 1 is the larger park, which, just for those, is the park on the interior corner of that mixed-use institutional area. So we were trying to develop some of these unit counts in a way that, one, the applicant understands that, hey, yeah, they can get started, because some of the elements for the park we are waiting on are weather and time sensitive. Everything is deployed to the property, so whatever can be installed on tract 973, which is Park 1, has been installed, but we are waiting for some finished surfacing and then some other elements that are weather sensitive. Court surfacing, they're working on some of the walls and cleanup, landscape and lighting. So it's you know, the 95% of the work is done. It's the final 5%, which everybody sees, which is a concern, and everybody wants to make sure is provided for, since it is going to be a public park. So we came up with a number, and we, being community development and engineering, trying to, one, get some workflow happening in anticipation of this summer. We have a couple staff members going out on maternity or paternity leave, so trying to get a good bit of work done so we can increase our workload, knowing it will decrease when we have some staff members out of the office, and try to not cause too many ripple effects in how staff get work done, internal as well as for the service to provide to the community. So we thought 20 was a reasonable amount. This was talked about at Land Use Committee with Laura. Sorry, I'm looking to the left. And then I briefed Public Works Committee a little bit on this item. So Park 1 is 20 units. And then once they finish this park, they would then get more units released. Park 2, the northeast corner, they would provide, the city would be, staff have put this forward again, we're starting here, with 10 units for a total of 40 on a weekly basis. There are many elements, you know, to consider. We have staff to do building plan review, there's site plan review per parcel, per, you know, building, which shares between engineering and planning. You know, they look at each lot itself. It's highly scrutinized on walls, grading, percent impervious surface relative to storm drainage, as well as allowed zoning items that are zoning items related to impervious surfaces also. So it all works hand in hand, and they have to do many things just at the individual building lot level. So that we had thought of, you know, 10 a week wasn't overwhelming. We can get those in the queue for 40 residential permits, which would get you to 60 at this point. And that would be what they could do prior to release of park. When we would have Park 2 improvements done, and then Park 2 improvements would then facilitate most everything else. The affordable housing units I kind of already mentioned. And then the other item kind of on the list is the staff, or the soil stockpile on lot 407. And for those who aren't aware, zoom real quick, don't get car sick.
Oh.
407 is the other mixed-use institutional lot, park, property, mixed-use institutional, and then city lot. So the soil stockpile is on this lot now. They have graded out and cleared everything on 409. They have cleared up the road, as we talked about in our discussions with Toll Brothers. So that's the soil stockpile is kind of the one remaining item to share and discuss. The point on the soil, you know, staff is cognizant that it's, you know, a big mountain. We're also cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of topsoil needed for phases 3 and 4. My point as your, you know, engineer and public works director is the fewer trips we can have on our roads, the better, right? Trips are actually, vehicles don't really drive pavement design. It's called ESAL, so easels, or equivalent standard axle loads for dump trucks. That's how you design roads. So the less impact we have with dump trucks on our roads, the better. So my hope is we don't send soil away that would in turn come back. So we're trying to get a better understanding of what is needed for phase 3 and then needed for phase 4. The phase 3 would be spread on phase 3 as they built houses. Phase 4 would go away. They do expect to come in for the final plat of the phase 4 elements within the next 8 months. So they are underway as far as mass grading. You can see they do have utilities, not all the way installed, but they are installing utilities on the property. So they are plugging away on the mass grading element and development of phase 4 while they're trying to wrap up phase 3. And then of course build houses in phases 1 and 2 and now moving into 3. So I think we came up today with a couple of items on, after some conversations that were had on the soil stockpile and trying to make sure it's whatever isn't needed, and they'll do some mathematical calculations for their surface needs on phase 3 and 4 for landscape and yards. And then whatever isn't needed, they work on hauling away. They would deploy the dirt in phase 3 as they work. When we get to phase 4 final plat, they will move that into lots within phase 4. And then some of the other tools at our disposal are bonds. So we have a site restoration bond, it's called. So for the subdivision of 3 and 4, pretend, you know, nothing ever happened. It looked like what it looked like. So if they go and start this work, we have a bond to put some things back in place to some extent. So when we get through a phase, or typically a plat, and this one is phased, which not all of them are phased, we do adjust those bonds and either A, releasing them, or B, reducing them, or giving the owner an opportunity to put one in place in replace of. So sometimes their costs are whatever they are to get a bond or edit a bond or reduce a bond. So we did mention that today. We certainly could have the bond when we release phase 3 or reduce phase 3 and 4 bond for phase 4 only, put in a clause for the impact to soil removal on lot 407. So there was a bondable element of the soil stockpile. So I think those are the brief highlights on that, Laura. What have I missed? And would there be a better image to look at?
I don't think we've missed anything at this point, other than that we did talk last week with both the Land Use Committee and the Public Works Committee. So 2 committees have had the opportunity to review and weigh in. We did make some small amendments to the document since it was in the packet. We did not get that sent out until today, and that was really to adjust the stockpile one. I think one thing that would probably be okay as well, and Steve and I have talked about this, is that stockpile like we have right now, we have it where you would have essentially to have it moved at time of final plat application for 4, but we could also look at by final plat, you know, to provide a little bit more flexibility in time. The unit discussion, you know, it was tough. We've got a lot of projects in the hopper and a lot of permits that were going to be in review this year. So we tried really hard internally with our development review team to have a robust conversation. So it was a pretty big group exercise. And so I think we're at a place where we're definitely getting there, and we were prepared to bring this draft and have this discussion with council this evening.
Thank you. Are there questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Schaefer. You're muted.
Thank you. A comment and then a couple of questions. Comment is a few weeks ago, I observed one of those double trailer dump trucks full of dirt, full of topsoil, actually driving in from Big Rock into the development. And by appearances, it appeared that dirt came from somewhere else. I was kind of scratching my head over that, knowing that big pile of dirt was there in the development. And I mentioned that only, you know, Steve and Laura, for your awareness. There likely was a very good reason that was happening, or perhaps appearances, you know, there's a lot more going on in appearances. But again, I can't imagine why they'd want to bring in dirt from another location unless that existing pile of dirt they have on the lot 407 somehow is not suitable as topsoil. So just something to think about. Questions, and this is a question leading to a comment, I think, but the question is, it's my understanding that until the city releases these properties for residential, as a residential permit, it can't even sell these. Is that correct? Or can they be sold before final permit?
So I believe that they're in what they call the pre-sale of those units. They can't technically transact until there's a final plat and the building is constructed, which is several months out. And then just to address your first question, my guess is it was some sort of structural fill that needed to go in for probably phase 4. So that might be why you saw a truck go in, or they were doing something with utilities and backfilling, but Steve would know better.
Yeah, it would have to depend, Mr. Schaefer, on what you did or didn't see in the truck itself. So you recall, we do own the utilities and the roads that go in on new subdivisions, and we have pretty strict standards on the materials that do go into those roadways and trenches. So normally there's very little material on site that stays, that can live in the trenches once they become roadway right away. So yeah, normally the bottom of the trench is crushed rock, 5/8 crushed rock. We do allow pit run above what's called the spring line of the pipe. So bottom of the trench, pipe layer, pipe zone, and then above the pipe we want crushed rock, and then they can do called a pit run or a type of compactable gravel and soil that goes in the roadway. But yeah, most of the time what you excavate on property here outside of summer is non-usable as far as structural backfill.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's good.
Which is a real pain in the bottom, right? I mean, it's a lot of earth to move, and
yeah, that makes good sense. So thanks. The comment I have is by holding up the permits for the final residential permits, the Cole Brothers is highly motivated to accommodate our requirements as far as the finishing the parks and things like that. So I can't imagine there'd be any great delays or any significant hiccups in this process. It seems relatively straightforward and safe from a city perspective that we'll see the parks and everything completed as we desire due to this agreement.
Yeah, there's a lot of weather sensitivity to the finish items, kind of as we mentioned. So that's the unfortunate element of where we are. Yeah, and there is no lot of record at this time until we run the plat through the subdivision, which we call the final plat process, right? That creates all the 116 units. So there's nothing sellable other than a promissory note on lot 283 to someone, right? So.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Naplin.
Yeah, thanks. Just really quickly, if this agreement was something council felt comfortable with, when would you envision final plat?
It is rumored, as we are in a pandemic and I have people all over the place in and out of the office, some sick, some not, that it was resubmitted today. So usually it's several weeks review. I know they are hopeful that it comes to the next available council meeting. I don't know that we'll get to it, but I would wager a couple weeks review. I know the paperwork for the plat document itself was fairly tidy. Last Larissa sent questions and comments back. I can't speak for planning. As far as the as-built, those are in, so we'll have to review those. I know we've sent survey out to confirm things. So, I mean, it could be the meeting on the 15th of March for a touch, and I would assume this document, an agreement would come in front of, we'd have to work with Daniel on the orientation of those processes, but I would imagine this would come first, the plat would come second, kind of thing, so that protection is had in hand.
That actually really helps. So I'm looking at it, and I mean, there's a reason why we don't want to bond things and why we have expectations of things being done. And it feels a bit generous. It would allow them to complete 62% of their units before having these parks done and some of this other work done. And in land use, I think the comfort level is lower. So maybe 20 and 20 instead of 20 and 40, something like that. I think the timeline is pretty long. If you add 6 months to a March approval, that means just to get the first part done, they would have until, probably the end of September, and the second one, end of December. I just don't know how weather dependency would require them to not be done sooner. So I think it's a bit generous, the timeline, and just, if there's a lot of staff, they can, the sooner they can get that done and the city be able to review it and put it behind us, the better. And so I'd really like to see a shorter timeline, perhaps, at the most 4 and 6 months instead of 6 and 9 months, and then cut the units down. There needs to be some significant incentive to get this done. And then a question about the bond amount, how this will be tied to the timeline, because I see the 6 months and the 9 months, but I don't see a consequence. So, if they don't meet one of these parameters, would the bond be called immediately? What is the mechanism we have here? And then in addition about the bond, our cost, if we had to, install these improvements, is much greater than the contractor. My understanding, it's typically bonded at 150%. 150% of what? Our cost or their cost? And so I just want to make sure that we have appropriate amounts in our bonding to cover if the taxpayer, under, our rules of who and how we hire people, that we could afford to pay for it if we came to that. And I know it seems like a long shot, but I lived up the street from Fox Hollow. That development turned on a dime and was abandoned. You just don't know what's going to happen. The shorter timeline, the better. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll hit.
Sorry, we are about out of time, so I need to just ask a couple quick questions. One is if everyone is fine with it, and Mayor, if it's okay with you, we still have the ARPA fund final rule and utility discount options. If we could add those to our council meeting, especially since it's such a shorter agenda tonight, just so that we can get a touch on those. And then seeing how, as not everyone got to speak to this, and I'm assuming the directors need a little more direction maybe, or just thoughts from council, would we also want to add this item to the agenda so everyone else has a chance to speak on it? Would that help you, directors?
Sure.
And Mayor, is that fine if we also just add the Toll Brothers, this item to the agenda as well to finish our conversation? Okay, so with that, then I'll just note that we have 2 reports. We have our human services grant reports. It's just the updated what has come in so far. I think the cutoff was today. There's also always the city council planning calendar on our agenda too, with a wonderful link to click on and see all the things in the pipeline. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 6:58. So everyone has a chance to step away for a few minutes before we have to come back at 7. Thank you.
Hey, Laura? Did you see,
I'm, yes, Dot? I'm
Did
sorry,
you see
Councilmember
that-
Lingle?
yeah, it just came over the email that 1782 died.
Thank you.
I don't know about 12, is 1220 dead? Is 1220 dead? You don't know?
Is that the Senate bill? Because the Senate bill never made it out of appropriations. They chose to go with the House bill.
Well, what Sightline just posted was that 1782 was dead.
Right, I'm saying
And then it
1220,
never went out of the House.
Right.
So it's dead for this session.
right, well, if 1220 was the Senate companion,
No, I
1220
think the
never-
Senate companion was 5670.
okay. I don't know which 1220 is then.
Yeah, it may already be dead. It was not 1220. Wait a second. Yeah, there's a 1220 that had a lot of signers initially. Yeah, there was another one, 1220 at one point.
Right, that was the
It may
Senate.
be gone though.
That was the Senate version, and when they were trying to do reconciliation, they decided not to go forward with both the Senate and the House bills. And they moved it towards only you doing the House bill, and the Senate said that they would, if it made it out of the House, they would use that as their vehicle. So that.
So they combined 1220.
No, they didn't. 1220 just died. They just said, we're not gonna even move it forward. We'll get a bill, we'll get the bill. If it passes the House, then we'll take it and we will do we'll do with it what we can, because it'll go from the House to the Senate. They weren't even gonna have their own vehicle. They decided it didn't make sense to have two different vehicles. So.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And
And
then
we do have
1782
legislative-
died.
So we do
Okay.
have a legislative update on the agenda. And so we are at 7:06 PM with a quorum. So I'm going to go ahead and call the February 15th, 2022 Duvall City Council meeting to order at 7:06 PM. And clerk, as soon as the flag comes up, I will ask council to join me in the flag salute.
Do we do roll call, Mayor? Or is that?
You know what?
Oh, no, wait, that's after flag salute. I'm
I
sorry.
apologize.
No.
I only have one screen today, so I trying to go back and forth between seeing people and going back to the agenda. So yes, flag salute is before roll call. So I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the United
of the
States
United
of
States
America
of America.
and to the
and
republic
republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. Now, clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Isaacson. Councilmember Schaefer.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McHenry.
Here.
Councilmember Mercer.
Here.
Councilmember Hoag.
Here.
Councilmember Napland.
Here.
And Councilmember Lingill. And
Here,
Mayor Overlander.
All right. We have a quorum. And so I'll move on to additions or corrections to the agenda. Under unfinished business, item number 2, ARPA final rule. Item number 3, utility discount program. And item number 4, continuation of the Toll Brothers discussion. Are there any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve this evening's council agenda?
So moved, McHenry.
Second, Hoag.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this evening's council agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Now we will move on to comments from the audience. First of all, clerk, did we receive any written comments for this evening's meeting?
No, Mayor, we did not.
Thank you. And now with that, we do have 2 attendees that are attending the Zoom meeting right now. So if either one of you would like to speak, please raise your hand and the clerk will elevate you to a panelist and you'll be able to have 3 minutes to speak to any topic you wish. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up, so we will go ahead and move on to approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda?
So moved, McHenry.
Second, Hope.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this evening's consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. So we will go ahead and move on to scheduled items. First up, mayor's report, legislative update. So first and foremost, you know, it was really touch and go, but as Councilmember Lingle pointed out, she just saw the notice that House Bill 1782, the middle housing bill, did not make it out of the House of Origin before cutoff. In theory, this means that the bill is dead for session. However, it could turn into what we call a zombie bill. And that could mean that if it's attached to the budget or deemed necessary to implement the budget, that it could revive at a later point in session. At this point, we are more than halfway through session. Today was the House of Origin cutoff, which means that in theory, anything that's policy related that didn't make it out of either the House or the Senate is dead for session, unless it is necessary to implement the budget. In general, we haven't had too many bills that we were watching too closely. Most of the time has been spent on the middle housing bill. But I did have the opportunity to attend the Association of Washington Cities Mayors Exchange last Thursday in Olympia. It was the first time we've met in person in 2 years. So it was actually really nice to see fellow mayors from across the street or across the state in person and get to connect with them, as well as get to see some of the legislators in person as well. Just kind of give you an update for folks that aren't aware, both of the House and the Senate released a statewide transportation package. It almost overwhelmingly relies on existing revenue and is really focused on funding mega projects like 522, completing 522, which has been a city priority for several years. Actually funding the Highway 2 trestle project, replacement project, getting baseline funding for that. I can tell you from a staffer perspective, I started working on that in 2010. So that gives you an idea of how long it takes to get a mega project funded in the legislature. There's also funding for the I-5 bridge, which has been in process and coordination with Washington State and the state of Oregon for 20 years. Actually more than 20 years, I believe at this point, as well as funding for our Snoqualmie Valley partners for Highway 18 corridor improvements, as well as Snoqualmie Parkway. The transportation package does have some items in it. We're not sure where they're going to go at this point. One of the key things is it changes utility taxes potentially for a local option. Another item that was good for all cities and counties is providing councilmanic authority to approve to increase your TBD from 0.2% of the sales tax to 0.3 with a councilmanic authority, and after the first 2 10-year periods of a TBD, allow continued approval of those TBDs. As of right now, our existing TBD that is voter approved will go away in 20 years, whether the voters want it or not, unless this legislation goes through. Other key things that came up are the fact we had a presentation from the Washington State's economist from the Economic Revenue Forecast Council. The news was really, really surprising, and I will send those documents off to council probably tomorrow. The official forecast came out today, but our manufacturing in Washington State is up 13% above pre-pandemic levels. Our state has the strongest GDP since 1984. There has been wage growth across the board of all sectors. While there has been a spike in employees not being at work due to injury and illness, so that has created some obvious challenges, which the city knows all too well. Construction, retail, and information and professional business services are stronger now than they were pre-pandemic. The leisure and hospitality industries are still weaker than they were pre-pandemic, but I think as we see restrictions start to disappear, I think we will see that change very quickly. Aerospace jobs continue to increase, which is also surprising given the reduced air travel due to the pandemic. New business applications statewide are up significantly. And the economists are expecting inflation to decrease slightly next year. One of the interesting things that is come about in this report is that housing growth is remaining higher in 21 and 22, was higher in 21 than it was versus 2015. So they are expecting forecasting an additional 1,200 units over what was originally forecasted in the state of Washington this year. Just goes to show you that if people need housing, it's going to be built. So the other really interesting part is that the statewide sales tax is up 17 year over year for growth, and it ended up not going down during the pandemic year. So that means that as the world has been in this pandemic and folks have been very, very worried about sales tax, it's not just Duvall that has seen significant growth in our sales tax base. It's the state as a whole, and that's good for everyone. The other item is that was a really interesting point is that September of 21st had the highest REIT collections in state history. For the public, that's real estate excise taxes. And that was the highest in our state's history. We also had an update from the state emergency management director, which also tied into the economic revenue forecast. And one thing that they were really highlighting during that meeting is that for folks that haven't seen, Glacier Peak is becoming more active. They're asking for more monitoring systems. That is our biggest volcanic threat in the state of Washington. And while it's in rural areas, it would most definitely affect Duvall if it were to become overactive and explode. Being the fourth, one of the other issues that came up is that, well, folks may not see it based on historic data. Washington State is the fourth most disaster-prone area in the country. And so that is partially a result of just our natural circumstances, and it's also a result of increasing wildfires, increasing storms and snowstorms. And that has a big hit to the economy, but also stresses the need for really focusing on emergency management in the areas that are most prone. And of course, as we all know, preparation is everything. Other than that, we received a significant legislative update on the middle housing bills and some of the Voting Rights Act legislation that's out there. And we also had our AWC Board Legislative Steering Committee today, which really kind of rehashed where we're at. Now that cutoff has come and gone at 5 p.m. today, there will be some reevaluation looking at where things are going to go during the session. But as far as the bills that we are most concerned about, I think we're relatively okay. I think that overall for the state as a whole and the region as a whole, the transportation package is not bad at all. We did hear from the House and the Senate transportation chairs, and they do expect an actual revenue package in the coming years. I did, of course, bring up our perennial issue that we've been working on for the last 6 or 7 years and put it in the context of the middle housing bills and the fact that while we're all meeting our growth targets, we can't control the state highways and the county roads. People aren't living where they're working as GMA intended, and that if we continue to see more growth, you know, in particular in Snohomish County, where the exponential growth is much greater than here on a per household basis, it's going to significantly impact our ability to keep our communities safe with having those major roads blocked more often with traffic during floods or without. And after that comment, the state Senate Transportation Chair declared in the meeting he wants to have a meeting with me and Duvall this interim, so we'll be getting that scheduled. And he seems very interested in looking at the corresponding legislation that's needed on transportation planning and funding to achieve some balance with the housing bills that will continue to come forward. That is one side note on these middle housing bills, is that I believe that we will be seeing even more of this next year. This year, the stakeholder process was not robust. There was a lot of, I would say, not good behavior on the proponent side in not inviting the conversation from stakeholders like us that have significant concerns, real valid concerns about how the legislation would impact our city, our character, as well as our public safety and our transportation. So those bills are going to come back. I would also expect, because of the conversations on these middle housing bill with requiring duplexes and getting rid of single housing, single family zoning, that we should expect that the conversations over the last few years about forcing cities to annex annexation areas should rise again. And I think that will likely be part of the conversation that we need to be prepared for and plan for. I think the ultimate takeaway is that it's not if we are forced to do something that we don't want to do or can't accommodate, it's when. And so as a city, we need to be extraordinarily strategic about how we're handling our annexations, how we're handling our policy, and how we're advocating at the county and state level in particular. So that sums up the legislative report, longer than normal, so I apologize, but happy to answer any questions that I can. Councilmember Hoke.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank you for so eloquently expressing your concerns about the housing bills, especially the 1782 that came forward. So I definitely appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you,
Our
Councilmember.
community.
All right. I'm not seeing anything else, so we will go ahead and move on to King County Fire District 45 report with Chief Erskine. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. How are you all tonight? I did submit a chief's report. Hopefully you've all had the opportunity to take a look at that. Some of the highlights: during the month of January, the district responded to 111 calls for service. 76 of those were in the downtown headquarters area, mostly the city. And then 31 at our East Station. 4 were out of district for mutual aid requests. We continue to see a majority of our calls are EMS related, which is expected, especially in a pandemic. We do have some exciting news in that we have filled our deputy chief vacancy. We hired Wendy Moffitt, who was previously with South Whidbey Island. She has over 28 years experience in the fire service. She's a great addition to the team, and we're really looking forward to getting her on to one of these meetings and introducing her to all of you. Most of you also know Stu Rowe. I know that he has strong ties to the city and has been with the district for over 30 years. He was promoted to deputy chief or division chief, of operations. He will be going to get some training to become our fire inspector, and also will be working as our training officer. So our hope would be that in 2023, we can have him working directly with the city with all the planning and growth that is anticipated, and getting into all the facilities within the city, and just keeping everybody safe and compliant with the fire code. A final promotion was Greg Bawden. Battalion Chief Bawden was promoted to Division Chief of Support Services. Within that role. He'll oversee our fleet and facilities, but he also has an extensive background in emergency management and will serve as the district's liaison and would be available to consult with the city should you have a need for that. We were very fortunate that we had a promotional process that brought in candidates from all over, and we interviewed 4 and were able to bring on 1 from the outside and promote 2 from within to really strengthen our administrative team and fill some needs that the district had, and it'll just better allow us to serve the community. So we're excited about that. Those are the highlights, and I don't really want to go on too long. If anyone's had the opportunity to review the chief's report and you have any questions, I will gladly field those now.
Are there any questions from council? All right. Well, thank you, Chief. Good to see you, and hope you have a good evening.
You also. Thank you. And
Thank you.
We're always around.
All right. Excellent. I've lost my agenda here, so hold on just a moment while I pull it back up. We will go ahead and move on to a report from our Duvall Police Department with Chief Duvall.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, city staff, and community members who are present. Chief Duvall, Duvall Police. I'd like to start by just thanking Chief Erskine for inviting us over to that promotional ceremony. It was well-deserved for those individuals who got promoted, and we are happy to attend. So thank you for allowing us to do that. I'm happy to report that our wave runners were delivered and are currently in our Sally Port. So we're excited about that, and it's great news for us to get that program back up and running. Our staff is working to get the boater certifications completed, and we're scheduling practical training on personal watercraft for the spring. Storage options for those units is being worked on for next winter as well. We're busy hiring and training new staff. We had 2 additional officers separate from our agency in the past month. One of our newest officers has completed his field training program, Officer Dunkley, and he's on his own, which we're excited about, and congratulations to him. Officer Head began the academy on February 9th. We had 2 additional lateral hires that were sworn in last week by Mayor Ockelander. We're excited to have both of them on board. We hosted entry-level interviews in January and lateral interviews on February 8th, and we did start the background process on one of those lateral candidates this last week. We still have 2 open positions to fill, so we're actively seeking for candidates to fill those. We'll be hosting a sergeant assessment on March 28th to fill our open supervisor position. We did get 3 candidates that applied for this position. 2 were external and 1 is internal. And we're working on needed improvements for our locker room to have a separate changing area for our female officer. We need additional information from an architect to determine construction options before we do move forward with that project. Other improvement projects are still on the horizon. We're working with Public Works to get those scheduled. So far, the roof was replaced, the alder trees had been removed, the exterior has been painted, and new lights were installed in our Sally Port and patrol room areas. In your packet, I provided January's monthly stats with a comparison of last year's numbers. There is a slight decrease in the call volume this year due to the changes in laws and the reduction of our staff. Is there any questions?
Councilmember Naplin?
This isn't really a question. I just wanted to thank you for that report. I had asked if we could start getting a report, and it's just really wonderful. And I think if there's any community members listening, that I bet they appreciate it too. So thank you for all your hard work, you and your team.
Thank you, Councilmember Naplin.
Thank you, Chief DeBach. And we will go ahead and move on to council committee reports. First up is the Finance and Administration Committee.
I guess I could just go ahead. I think the plan right now is we have a meeting this week. I'm guessing, maybe I'm optimistic, but I think we need another 3 meetings just to work on procurement policy to get it to a point that it's ready to, get feedback from city staff and directors and mayor, and then to come to the whole council. So, and then, yeah, our meeting this week, I can't remember if it's one of the ones we're also taking on normal business again as needed by staff. So.
Thank you, Chair McHenry. Moving on to land use.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have been working on updating our OneDrive and putting our summaries on there so you can see what's been going on at our last meetings. But we do have a meeting tomorrow morning at 9:30, and we'll be getting an update on OpenGov, the Toll Brothers Agreement. We'll be discussing the DFA facilitation. And we'll be talking again about the autonomous delivery robots, which we discussed in COW, and discussing policy work update and legislative and tree grant. Sorry if you hear noise. I have a dog eating dinner, so sorry.
All right, thank you, Chair Hogue. Does anyone have any questions for Chair Hogue? Seeing none, we will move on to public safety.
Let's see, we don't really have a chair yet, a replacement chair for public safety, but I'll speak up. We did not have a meeting in the last couple of weeks, and even if we did, I think the chief did a excellent job of updating us. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Now we can move on to Public Works.
Thanks. At our meeting last week, some of the big things we talked about, we reviewed questions for the community survey regarding the Big Rock Park, the east parcel. So that's basically done and ready to move out soon. And so you should see that at some point. Talked about the police station renovation, as well as the wastewater treatment office remodel, as well as also the storm codes getting reviewed and the final plat with Toll Brothers, which we started to talk about in the COW as well, and a staffing update, and that was it.
Thank you. Any questions for Mayor Pro Tem McHenry? Seeing none, we'll move on to the ad hoc committees for council procedures or human services grant applications.
So I do have an update. We had a really great meeting yesterday on the council procedures and code of conduct. We worked through code of conduct. I feel like we got a lot accomplished. And so we will have more to bring forward, hopefully at one of our cows or at our retreat, but it's really coming along. And I just have to say thank you to our city clerk, Sarah McMillan, because you've just really helped us keep on task, and you've done a great job of, you were able to do the editing during our meeting, which I just appreciate so much. So you're wonderful. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to other council reports. Does anyone have anything general that they would like to share with the group this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the city administrator report with Mr. Kevin Offel.
Good evening. Let me get myself, share my screen. I always hate these things. All right. Hopefully everybody can see it. This is our update for today. Police department received a donation of $5,000 by a grateful citizen who wishes to remain anonymous. We also, that's a part of a requirement that we have to report to any donations of that level. And so we're doing that. We swore in 2 new officers last week, which the chief already mentioned, and looking forward to having them come on board and get going. Big Rock Road speed limit. There's if you look at Big Rock Road, when it was in the county, the way state law RCW works is that it was 35 miles an hour unless posted otherwise. So when it was a county road, when we annexed it, we've come to find that when we annexed it, cities are automatically 25 unless posted, and the only way you can post it is by changing the ordinance. So we've found no ordinance which changed the speed limit to 35. And so we're going back and reposting it to 25 because we have no ordinance which says it should be 35 anymore. It doesn't automatically stay because it was a county road before. So we're doing that. If the council wishes, they could post it to 30. We could change an ordinance and post it as recommendation from Public Works and from police is that we keep it at 25 because we don't really see a valid reason at this point with traffic to have it at 35. So there's that. Traffic signals, Steve has been working with WashDOT. Steve, I should say, Director Lenishevsky has been working with WashDOT for quite some time to enhance our signals and operations. I think we all know the signals are not connected to WashDOT. He has bent them to his will, and they have now agreed to bring us into their system, and that will be a huge benefit for us. And that's the three signals, including adding cameras and road access and control at Route 203 at Big Rock, at Stevens, and then at Woodinville Duvall Road corners. So that's going to be a huge advantage to us. I don't know the timeline for that. WashDOT probably doesn't have the timeline for it either, but it's a big win, and it was a lot of good hard work from Steve and pressuring continuously. Sorry. And then the positions at Public Works have been filled. I think Public Works kind of mentioned it. They got an update, and here's the update for everyone. Is both the project manager positions have been filled. One was in-house, one is external. An excellent candidate who we're stealing from some Amish. And we have all of our operational roles have been filled. It's the crew lead, the maintenance 2 and maintenance 1. It was essentially a move up. The crew lead came from a maintenance 2 position. Maintenance 2 was a maintenance 1, and maintenance 1 was a temporary position. We're really happy with all three of them. Excellent people that we have in these new positions. Steve Lenishevsky, our Public Works Director, is going to give us a little update on the wastewater treatment plant. Steve, are you ready?
Absolutely. Good evening, Steve Lenishevsky, Public Works. Hello, Mayor, Council, and staff, and citizens. Just briefly, we will have a public hearing at the next meeting because we are getting upon the sunset of our 6-month sewer moratorium, so we have to have that hearing. But in the meantime, we have entered into contract with Parametrics to provide that treatment train upgrade process. Part of the process not only is the overall treatment plant expansion for the 4th train, but also looking at our biosolids processing and how that is going to change. So we looked at an alternative analysis. Parametrics has looked at a screw press as well as a centrifuge. Screw press looks kind of like a sausage maker, pushes things through, water gets pushed out of teeny tiny holes, so you have the clean biomass being and having its water amount extracted. We haul that away, so any amount of volume and weight we can remove from our biosolids is beneficial. So we're looking at how that happens with energy and then any other sort of chemical addition, polymers to assist in that. And then the other part of the process is the centrifuge. Think of that as your washing machine. You put it in, it spins around and forces water out. So that's kind of the same approach with biosolids. So that is in process. We will begin finalizing which alternative is going to be best to facilitate the City of Duvall's biosolids management. And we're looking at all costs, like I said, energy, chemical additions and those costs, time, as well as hauling costs with tonnage. And then the membranes. So as we expand the 4th train, right, we have to buy new membranes. That is and does have a large lead time. So we've worked with the esteemed attorney and gone over some of those documents. The RFP is ready to be issued. So we'll put that out on the 17th to begin the pre-purchase process, which is Suez is the current tenant on site. And then we'll have a bid opening on the 7th. Thank you, Mr. Kevin.
Yep. And then the next is talking about council in-person meeting. We're looking at different options, and our city clerk, Sarah McMillan, has talked to the fire department about possibly using their facility because it's sort of up and ready. So I don't know if Sarah, are you ready to talk a little bit about it?
Sure, no problem. So let's see. So I had seen some old minutes looking through things here and saw that we used to meet at the fire department. And I also saw that the fire district board is meeting in a hybrid way. And so I contacted Chief Erskine and went over to take a tour of their facility, and Chief Erskine has agreed to allow the city council to meet at the fire district for a very low fee for $50 a year, and use their equipment and everything, and also the planning commission. And he's talked with his board about this and everything. And so he said we could do this as soon as the building opens to the public, which he anticipated would be sometime in March. Just really, really kind of the fire district and the chief to let us do that. And we don't really have a good facility to do that in right now, in a state that we could feasibly do that. The visitor center is not in any sort of condition to meet in at this time anyway. So just really good news. Represents a really good partnership with the fire district.
And one of the positives is that there's not an additional amount of audiovisual that we need to purchase. They're ready to go, and they can support us doing both in-person and hybrid meetings. And then the final portion is from Director Laura Thomas, talking about community outreach and Eastlink Connection Survey. Laura.
Good evening, Mayor and council members of our community. This is pretty brief. You've seen a couple of emails from me over the last week. There's a lot going on in the realm of transportation. And so we're starting to push some information out to our community. One of them is the King County Metro Eastlink Connection Survey. We've added that to the website as of today. I don't know where, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's
I had
totally
to do
okay.
is I touched my mouse and everything fell apart.
That's okay. And then we also have the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is updating the 2022 to 2050 transportation plan. And they are seeking public comments as well through February 28th. So we'll continue to push that through our website and through our social media. We did have a meeting last week in one of our more regional meetings where we did ask for some changes to the King County Metro Eastlink Connection Survey. I'm not sure if they'll be able to do that, but when you go into the survey, you'll see that it is a little more difficult to navigate to Duvall because we're out in East King County and you really have to know what your bus route is. So we're hoping that we might get some changes to that, but it's getting late, so I wouldn't guarantee it. Thank you.
And
so, I'm sorry.
I'd just like to add in one more reason why it's important to take the Eastlink Connection Survey is that from the previous version of expanded service, or you could call it restored service, as a result of Eastlink coming to downtown Redmond, they originally had a route going up Woodinville Duvall Road and down Avondale to get to downtown Redmond into Eastlink. That has been changed. So it actually goes from downtown Duvall up Novelty Hill, which is a huge improvement in efficiency and just even the mental side of thinking about getting on a bus and taking it to downtown Redmond. So I think anybody that can take the survey, please do. Because that is going to help determine what the final service schedule looks like at this point in time. Councilmember Napland.
Yeah, that is excellent news about the change in the route. One thing that during my Snoqualmie Valley Mobility Coalition meeting, they went over this, and what they said is that engagement drives service. So we need to get engagement of our community saying, you know, we need this, we would use it. That's what will drive the service. So anyway, I just encourage, you know, share it via social media, and it is tricky when you enter it, it asks you kind of what your area is, and it isn't completely clear. We would be the north area, and the bus route that serves us is the 224. So hopefully we can get that shared so that those who do take the survey know how to navigate it. But thank you, that's really good news.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I just want to do another City Administrator Apple pointed it out, but another huge kudos to Director Lenishevsky on the 203 signal issue. That has been, he really has been working on that for multiple years. We even submitted it to Senator Dingber's office this year as a thing that needed to be addressed. And so all of that, that persistence is paying off. And I really believe as well that having those signals connected is going to help us with our further goals on getting our study in the future, as well as helping WashDOT start to understand better the challenges that we are actually facing in this region. So thank you, Director Lenishevsky, and you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a quick note too, two things I still really want to work for, and they have no reason to help us other than, to quiet us down and stop us from nagging. But I would like to work on, the intelligent transportation system. So King County does have that on their line from west of Collin Valley Road up into and through the Avondale intersection. So I'd like to work on that, getting connected into WashDOT. And then also the other thing that they're not doing at the cabinets, which I did ask for, and of course they told me what it would cost, is so when power goes out, right, they're not battery backup. I believe Big Rock flashes for a little while and then it goes dead, right? Flashing red and then dead on power outages, or none at all. I can't quite remember, but it is about $30,000 per cabinet. I don't have that laying around, of course, without council approval. I didn't want to bring it to the attention of WashDOT. I didn't want to slow down their processes, but it is about 30 G's per the 3 intersections, so that's about 90,000 on their estimate. To provide battery backup power. They usually last, depending on time of year and system, 8 to 20 hours, just again, depending on how many signals, how many phases, and all that kind of stuff. But that's all I have to add.
Thank you. Administrator Apple.
Yeah, I wanted to add, I think, we look at it from an emergency management perspective as it's very important for us to have this backup. I'm not sure why WashDOT doesn't do it as part of their basic package when they're updating lights, but I think we need to keep pushing. If you get a chance when you're talking to WashDOT or a state rep, this is very important for us. We become an island, and it could be a flood, it could be any sort of emergency management thing. We lose power, it's vital for us to have those lights up, at least for some time until we can get an alternate.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so we will go ahead and move on. We do not have any special presentation this evening or public hearings. So we'll move to our first item of unfinished business, Agenda Bill 21-113, interim ordinance for amending temporary use duration for decision. Director Thomas.
Good evening, Mayor, council members of our community. You might remember this item from the end of November. Honestly, we thought that we had scheduled it for the next council meeting. And when I went to go start to pull together public hearing documents, we found that we had not yet completed it. So we're bringing it back forward for the approval. This is the ordinance that would essentially suspend part of our policies to allow our businesses to continue to utilize what we would call temporary uses. And so you can see this is from the same presentation that we gave back in November. It's basically a redo of 2 previous ordinances. It's a repeal of 2 sections of our Duvall Municipal Code, 1452-020 D and E. It would be for 6 months. We would need to come back and hold a public hearing pretty quickly. And I'm actually proposing that we do that before the 60 days. So we're hoping that this evening that council approves this ordinance, and we will hold the public hearing on April 5th, 2022. I'm hopeful that this is the last time we'll have to do it. As the mayor said, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you, Mayor, council, and community.
Thank you. Does council have any questions, or would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve Agenda Bill 21-113A, the ordinance relating to temporary use duration as presented.
Second, Councilmember Naplan.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to approve Agenda Bill 21-113, interim ordinance for amending temporary use duration. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. We will now move on to a quick presentation by Director Mason on the ARPA final rule. Director Mason, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, and community members. Dana Mason, Finance Director. Let me share my screen. And just give me a thumbs up if you see a big blue screen that says state and local fiscal recovery. Okay, excellent. So this is, council is aware that the final rule was issued in January. So this is just kind of an overview of the final rule. And there are three key objectives for funding. These are right from the Treasury to fight the pandemic and support families and businesses struggling with its public health and economic impacts, to maintain vital public services, even amid declines in revenues resulting from the crisis, to build a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery by making investments that support long-term growth and opportunity. So there's 4 eligible use categories, and I am sure everyone's heard about them, but I'll just go over through them one more time. The first is public sector revenues, where the funding can be used to provide government services up to the amount of revenue lost due to the pandemic. The second is public health and economic responses, where funding can be used to respond to COVID-19 public health impact along with economic harms. Premium pay for essential workers. And then money can be spent on water, sewer, broadband, and infrastructure. The new features in the final rule is for the public sector revenue category, entities can now elect a standard allowance up to $11 million in revenue loss rather than use a calculation. So the federal government just assumes that an entity's lost up to $10 million in revenue. For public health and economic response, there's a broader set of eligible uses for impacted and disproportionately impacted populations. And then there's clarification that proportional capital expenditures may be allowable. For premium pay for essential workers, there are streamlined 2 options to provide premium pay by broadening the share of essential workers who can receive it without written justification. And then for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, water sewer projects that are eligible were expanded, and then as well as broadband investments were expanded. So in the public sector revenue loss categories, entities, this is the most general of the loss or the spending categories. Entities can spend up to the revenue loss on any service traditionally provided by government. So that includes constructions of schools and hospitals, road building, maintenance, and other infrastructure, health and other services, environmental remediation, and then provision of police, fire, and other public safety, just to name a few, but it's anything that the city usually does, really. For the public health response portion of category 2, expenditures can be used for COVID-19 mitigation and containment, medical expenses, behavioral health care, preventing and responding to violence, as well as public health capital expenditures like testing labs and equipment, emergency operations center, affordable housing, childcare facilities, schools, and primary health clinics. For the economic portion of category 2, funds can be spent to provide support to impacted and disproportionately impacted households, small businesses, nonprofits, and industries. And then the funds can be used to restore and bolster public sector capacity including government employment and rehiring public sector staff. In the third category, premium pay may be provided to essential workers who earn at or below 150% of state or county average wage, or aren't exempt from Fair Labor Standards Act overtime rules, or written justification is provided of how needs are met. In the fourth category, expenditures can be spent on a myriad of water and sewer infrastructure projects. So they've really broadened this category. And then to build broadband infrastructure, for expenditures to fall into this category, location or needs must be identified, and the new services must provide a minimum speed of 100 megabytes per second. And then here are the restricted uses. So the funds cannot be used for offsetting net tax revenue, deposits to pension funds, debt service or replenishing financial reserves, or the satisfaction of judgments and settlements, and they can't undermine COVID-19 mitigation practices in line with CDC guidance and recommendations. So there are some reporting requirements. There's an annual report that's due in April of each year. And then there's going to be additional requirements coming out on this reporting for NEUs or non-entitlement units, which is the category that the city falls into. And then the funds must be obligated at the end of 2024 and used by 2026. So the next steps, the city has applied for 2 hours of complimentary advice from Clark Newber, a CPA firm. So if you have where we'd like to gather uses or questions on how the city or council is interested in spending ARPA funds, and then I'll check to see if it's allowable, hopefully through Clark Newber or another resource, and get back to you. And then Mr. Oppel, any spending ideas would go to him and he'll put those together, the list together. Mr. Oppel, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you've done a good job of getting the overview of where we're at now. I think you'll see if you've looked at other reports prior to this, the rules were much stricter. They were really focused on only doing sewer, water, and stormwater infrastructure and some other things with direct COVID support. Now there's much more liberal uses that we can use, as long as they're not to offset taxes or to take care of pensions, things like Director Mason said. There's all sorts of ideas. We're trying to bring different potential uses together. One of them's having a municipal building design and site preparation, at least funding towards that. We've got positions that we've discussed. There's actually the staffing that talk about that we're getting from Dr. McGrath. There's a cost involved with going to a new pay structure, and that could be offset by ARPA. There's grants for ADA retrofits that we could do inside small businesses. There's things to support our local summer activities and things like sandblasts and all the other. So there's a number of things we're looking at, but we'd like to pull in those things together so that we can start bringing a list out and getting some prospective costs, so we can see how much we might be able to allocate for the different areas.
And before we take questions, I just want to reiterate that what Mr. Oppel and Director Mason are asking for is for council to email your ideas and questions, ideas to city administrator, questions to Director Mason, so that we can compile them and have a group, collaborative group discussion and start to narrow down categories of where we'd like to go. So with that, Councilmember Naplan.
Yeah, just real quick. I've seen a lot of other cities have a significant community engagement aspect to brainstorming for ARPA spending. And I just wasn't sure if are we thinking that will come later, and this is just really council ideas, and then we'll have outreach to the community, or how that's envisioned?
Well, we're already engaging with community groups who do things like summer stage and sandblast, and try to find out what, and March of the Vegetables, to find out what areas they might need support for. Those are existing organizations which we're looking at trying to see if we can support them. So there's already some engagement going on with that.
Yeah, I think I was saying more in regards to the residents that live here and our taxpayers in our city, reaching out to the general population and letting them know.
I'll just be blunt, is we don't have anybody assigned to communications, and we do not have anybody but directors doing this work at this point. So the bandwidth, I mean, just be very honest, the bandwidth doesn't exist. Because the ARPA rules have changed, we may be able to get away with not hiring outside help, depending on what program is agreed to. But as far as doing any more than the basic level social media and communications that the city is doing right now, we do not have the staffing levels to keep up with basic work and do that work as well. So just, I don't like being so blunt, but I need to be. I wish we were in a different place, but that is where we're at right now. Mayor Pro Tem McHenry.
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation, Director Mason. It was so helpful. I know there's a lot to learn, and so you've consolidated it all really nicely for us. I'm sure there will be new developments as we go on. So just so I'm clear, it sounds like we email ideas to the city administrator, questions to Director Mason, but then when these are compiled and when you start looking at costs, will that come back, like maybe that's an entire cow where we talk about some of these things? And then, I mean, what Councilmember Naplin brought up is really important to me as well, but I get the bandwidth thing. I mean, maybe on the council side, since it's a big part of our rules to outreach to the community, we can work on that as best we can. I'd be happy to do a short survey with, I think it would be helpful when we come to a point where we've narrowed in on those ideas that we feel strongly about, if we just then put those ideas out to the community and just kind of gauge their interest and make sure we're on the right track. That might just help confirm. I mean, I'm guessing we're going to land about where the community also is interested in terms of ideas. So I think that would just help with transparency for the community and a better level of engagement.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. City Administrator Apple.
Yeah, I think, what you're talking about, Mayor Pro Tem, is a guided discussion, which allows for a little bit better, because otherwise if you throw out, hey, we've got $2 million, how should we spend it? That takes a lot of we say bandwidth, or it takes a lot of time and effort to get down to things. And you can also really upset people who have great ideas, but it's not, it's maybe not doable, or it's not allowed. Whereas if we have a directed discussion where we already kind of have a good feeling for what could be useful for the little community with the ability to bring in new ideas, that helps, because it makes it a little bit more manageable. And I think that's what we try to do. We try to do it in a cow, and then move out and try to publish it so that people understand what we're looking at doing.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Thanks. Yeah, I do want to remind the council that we do have an engagement process planned for our business community here in Duvall. One of the items we want to discuss with the businesses is what impacts they've had from the pandemic, what direct impacts they've had, what they foresee in the future, and their ideas on what we as a city can do to help them. So we're hoping that gives our business owners a good chance to voice their concerns and voice their opinions on what best can be done. As Mr. Oppel just said, we can't say, hey, we got a couple $1 million. What would you guys like to do with it? I mean, we can't do that. So our questions are going to be more along the lines of what I just said. And by the way, we're about to pull the trigger on that. The initial go around right now is planned to be Councilmember McHenry and myself meeting directly with with each business owner. And we have a scheduling process that we think will work well for that. If any other council members are interested in joining us, I can get you worked into the scheduling process as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Schaefer. I'm not seeing any more hands up, so I'm going to assume that we're ready to move on to the next topic. So thank you for your thoughts on all of this, folks, and look forward to seeing the ideas come in. Next up is unfinished business item number 3, the utility discount program, also by Director Mason.
Me again, Dana Mason, Finance Director. Let me share my screen. So just as a recap, we visited, or at the last Council of the Whole meeting, we went over some utility discount options. And to refresh, this is the City of Duvall's current low income schedule. We use a tiered approach with a 20% discount for those who meet the Seattle Bellevue, HUD, or HUD extremely low income criteria, 15% discount for those that meet the very low income criteria, and 10% who meet the low income criteria. We looked at 12 comparable cities to see what they provided for a discount, and 7 of them, or the majority of them, provided discounts for those who met the HUD very low income criteria. And then this slide does not include the City of Duvall, but the majority of them gave discounts in the 30, 40, 50% range. Then a council member had asked at the last meeting, how many of our low income customers receive pending disconnection notices and how many receive shutoff notices? And for the last round of pending disconnection notices, 5 out of 58 were for went to low income discount customers, and 1 of 23 shutoff notices went to a low income discount utility customer. So here's the slide for discussion. What I've done here is I've split, so I put the very low income and the extremely low income into this, the 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% discount range. And you can see down below the annual discount. So this would be the amount that it would cost the city. Currently, the city provides about $13,600 in discounts annually. And then if council wanted to continue providing a discount for those who met just the low income criteria, here's the amount at 10%, 15%, and 20%. So what staff is looking for right now is just a guidance or a direction from council and how they would like to proceed, or how you would like to proceed. Do you want me to leave this slide up?
All right, does anyone want to speak to this at this point? If folks do not want to talk about it tonight, we can move it again to the next agenda. If folks are not ready to have a conversation, and that's just fine. There is no rush on this item. Okay, Councilmember Naplin and then Hoag.
I guess I'm not sure how everyone feels. I think at the last meeting, we were kind of ending at, maybe the 40 to 50% range on the lower tier, which is a roll up of the 2 lowest tiers, and then at least continue the 10% on the other tier. I don't know how everyone else feels. I feel like, I would be good with that. I'd like to see something put in place. And I'm really thankful for the work that Dana and her team did on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoag.
After the last meeting, I was kind of leaning that same way, the 40% that we had talked about, but at that chart that you just showed, I liked that you have like dollar amounts associated with it. So and how much we're currently doing. And so just, I don't know, just looking at that chart made me think 30 to 40% was the, but I think that it's really important that we finalize this for sure.
Yeah, Director Mason, can you pop that chart back up?
And I think the broader, area that where some additional time, I guess 2 points is yes, we need to sort of provide some additional directional guidance. I think where I'm torn a little bit is I've made sort of the mental shift to offer a higher discount. I think it's the question around, and it was the chart you provided, that one, in terms of the majority of the cities focus the funds, the higher discount at a smaller subset of eligibility versus increasing the amount of discount and then providing that to the very low as well as the low. And so that's, I think, where I'm still sort of weighing the impacts on the eligible residents in terms of, would we be better off focusing a higher discount on a smaller set of residents, or continue to sort of distribute it, in which means that we either we're spending more across the board with the increased discount, or we're sort of limiting our impact a little bit. And so I don't know more broadly across the other council members if it sounds like there's some continuity or agreement around increasing the discount rates, but I don't know. I'd love to understand how some other council members are thinking about the low versus very low income thresholds.
And I do know that Councilmember Isaacson wants to have this discussion with the group as well. He has questions and about history and basics and for the group. So I'm not seeing anyone else eager to speak to this. So if I might kindly suggest that perhaps we should put this back on committee of the whole when he's returned, so that there can be a broader, longer conversation. Unless folks are really eager tonight. Oh, I do see a hand now. I missed Mayor Pro Tem McHenry's. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, I was gonna just agree with Councilmember Mercer and some of the things he said. A little more to think about still, and just what you said as well. I think, yeah, let's wait until Councilmember Isaacson's back and we can talk about this again soon.
Great. All right. Not seeing objections to that, so we'll move on to our last item of unfinished business in the continuation of the Toll Brothers agreement discussion. Director Thomas and Director Laniszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Laniszewski, Footworks. Hello, Mayor, Council, citizen staff. One of the last kind of questions and comments was related to maybe how the bond quantity worksheets are derived. So those are updated fairly frequently by staff. They are current cost estimates that we are experiencing. So they're not like it's the builder's per unit cost. They are a table that we submit to them and they fill out and resubmit to us. So it's market rate, public style of bid numbers, and then it has a 50% multiplier on top. So it's fairly hefty. And I think the mechanism and action in a bond, they normally are 2-year bonds or have a sunset date sooner. That is spelled out, and the 2-year portion is because, from what I can tell on how we derive that, is we typically only really bond the final lift of asphalt because we want that to be put on last, so we can, several reasons, test the integrity of the subgrade, which is the pre-finished surface as it's been built, and then not having construction activity mar the final surface. So that's usually last, and that is by our standards done at 85% build out, no sooner. So that typically does take 2 years in a plot anyway. If there were other mechanisms that were shorter in time, they'd have to be kind of those call action items. So we'd have to look into exploring how we would achieve that, which again, in an agreement, it could either be provided in a separate bond or some sort of allowance in a bond itself. So we can look into that. The other question, I think that was still out there, and maybe not question, a statement on, I know Councilmember Naplin's point was a shorter time frame. We heard that, so we can look into that. And I think there were a couple other hands up, and I don't know, Mayor, you want to open that up?
Yes. So if you could raise your hand if you want to speak or ask questions. Councilmember Hoag?
We did, I mean, in the land use committee meeting, we were really feeling uncomfortable, I think, with the number count, and then the affordable housing gets added on top of that. So I guess I'm kind of curious, the Public Works Committee looked at this too. Did they have the same feelings? My thought.
Mayor Pro Tem McHenry?
I mean, yes and no. I'm not sure, and Councilmember Schaefer can speak for himself. I don't know that we had very strong feelings one way or another. I mean, I think there's pros and cons to the different proposed numbers. I'm not opposed to some of the suggested lower limits of land use committee, but I don't know if there's a benefit to having the higher allowable counts that were originally on there. I don't know if Director Lenishevsky had spoken to all, or we had a chance to get to that in Cal about if there are any benefits to having what's the pros cons versus having a slightly higher amount of units allowed before, the different criteria versus lowering it. I mean, does that make a huge difference one way or another?
Are you asking staff or your peers?
Yeah, I'm asking staff.
Yeah, operationally, like I said, Laura, as Director Thomas and I really tried to strategize on how many permits we typically like to handle, what else we have going on as far as development activity to review, because there is a timeline on these things, and then how many can we fit in before we lose people for 6 weeks. So that's our concern in not having things fall through the gap. Yes, we have consultants, on standby who can assist, but again, they're not perfect. They're not staff per se. So there's more work to manage the work when staff are gone, if that makes sense. So we were trying to just get to a reasonable number of what we could handle, what we thought was palatable, and how much the applicant would handle as far as wanting to submit versus being able to submit. So I think the first chunk was 20. The second was deployed in 1 week intervals at 10 apiece for 40 more for 60. And then there are 12 units of affordable housing in this first phase. So that's 72 out of the 128. So a little more than half. I think, Laura, we've seen some developers hit that as far as an application rate for their permits, and some of them not get near that, even though they said they wanted to be way above that. So timing will be what it is. I don't know if you want to add anything to the permit number.
What I would say is, it was a challenging discussion internally. We weighed really heavily, like Steve said, our workflow, our staffing through the summer, the other projects that we have that are, going to be in final plat, which would be 65 Degrees and Rio Vista. So we have, possibly, at least another 100 units that we would be looking at permitting this year on top of what Toll Brother brings us in their kind of phase 1 park approach. And phase 2, we're going to be busy no matter what number we choose. I can say that I am pretty confident that if Toll Brother sees that they can submit, just say X amount of permits, just say 40 permits, they're probably going to submit their 10 a week over 4 weeks. And that's a lot of permits to review. We understand that, internally. It's one of the reasons why we've done training so that we have 2 people now that can plan review. We also have WC3, but it also does back up the planning side as well. You know, we're also implementing OpenGov. So we're just trying to juggle the staff that we have with the work that we have and that we know we're going to have over the next couple of years.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, just to reiterate what both Steve, Director Leshevsky and Director Thomas said, a lot of the schedule was based on our own staff availability and some upcoming leave of absences that we're going to experience. So this is the best schedule that we could come up with as far as accommodating our own staff capacity.
Councilmember Lingle?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I was understanding something about the affordable units. My understanding that 12 of the affordable units will be done as part of this this approval. Am I understanding that right? That is absolutely going to happen?
So
Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say the 12 that they have committed to are in this phase. So they haven't committed to when per se, but they're not included in any sort of embargoing. So they can be done at any time. I think that's the answer. Does that make sense?
So in other words, they can be done anytime in this phase, but we could enter into this, I think Councilmember Naplin said, somewhat generous modification and still not get the low income units, the affordable units. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
So I'll weigh in on that, Steve. So it allows them to apply for those permits and for us as the city to issue them. It's up to Toll Brothers to pick them up and construct them. But we're giving them the ability to do that as part of this agreement and not count them towards the number of units that would come in phase 1 and 2 parks.
So the way you just described it, I'm getting the impression, please correct me, that since you're not counting it against, there's some, I mean, we can't control whether they build them or not. We understand that, but there's an advantage to them if they want to pick up permits that would facilitate the affordable units. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, Councilmember
Okay,
Lingle.
because that was my big concern. I mean, here's something everybody needs to remember. Affordable is only 80% of median. So, or is 80% of median. And so it would be considered middle income housing under all this legislation, but it is considered affordable. And it's not like, I don't know, what is it, like $80-some thousand a year or something like that is 80% of median. But the other thing that we don't have from Toll Brothers is an update on the affordability analysis. The last time they did that, they did all their calculations at 3%. I think I'm not suggesting that, what I'm saying here, I want to get more to the point. I think we need an updated analysis of the affordable units because the interest rate will not be 3% as things appear to be going. And they did not provide an elasticity analysis on interest rate to show that units and how they would price would be affordable. And we seriously need to show more affordable housing production. And I know the mayor supports that. So this is one of our opportunities to show that we are doing middle housing, that we have always had a commitment to do this type of housing. And so, but when she says that, we also want to make sure that the numbers work for her. So I think Toll Brothers needs to get that to us to show that they are still going to price these at a higher interest rate and it will still work for that income group. Because I don't want them to come back like they tried to do before and try to swap out 2 for 1. We need all the affordable units we can get, particularly home ownership. Mayor, if you feel differently, I'm happy to have a discussion otherwise, but I think we're in agreement on that. We have been doing middle housing. We have always been doing middle housing, and we should make sure everybody understands we do middle housing.
Yes.
And Toll Brothers is part of that. So they need to show us the updated calculation. So we are sure we're going to get that housing, especially if we're going to be flexible at this point.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingle. Any other discussion on this one tonight?
So Mayor, as this will have to come back, obviously, I haven't heard, I think, enough from all. Some people are not necessarily supportive of the numbers as staff written, and there were comments made on land use. I don't want to come back and, are we splitting the difference? How are we all feeling? Do you want staff to reconsider based on, 3 of the committee meeting and then the others maybe not saying a whole lot? I haven't heard from that other constituent on the amounts. I think staff's, reasonably supportive either way, but I haven't, my scale hasn't been tipped yet. So I want to provide something back that everybody is, supportive of. There's no reason to not be. So I think that's just my ask. So if it's the staff number and the land use committee number, if we want to split the difference, okay. If we want to, if land use says, hey, do I have one more to support the land use numbers? That's 4. Hey, whatever. I'm game. I just want to know what to do to make my work and Laura's work as efficient as possible. So,
Mayor Pro Tem McHenry and then Councilmember Napland. And we haven't heard from Councilmember Schaefer or Mercer or Hogue yet.
Like I said, I honestly could go either way on them. I'd like to balance, staff considerations with some of the concerns of land use committee. So if there is a way to split the difference that makes sense, I'm fine with that. I really don't feel strongly one way or another. It sounds like either way it would honestly be okay. So if there is a huge benefit to staff and levels that would just help the flow easier, I would lean towards staff numbers. I'm kind of giving you a non-answer here, but I mean, like it's a bit of a tough one because I'm just not seeing a huge benefit one way or the other. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Napland, and then Schaefer and Hogue, and then hopefully if Councilmember Mercer has anything to add, I'd like to hear from him as well.
Yeah, for me, the timeline and the amount of time that the 6 to 9 months just doesn't seem to be as much beneficial to staff because as Director Thomas said, if they can submit those, they will. And 4 weeks is going to go by pretty quick. They'll go 10, 10, 10, 10, and it'll be done. And so giving 9 months just doesn't seem like it correlates. So for staff, if we know we're having some leads coming up, wouldn't it be beneficial to get the park improvements and the reviewing of the park improvements out of the way in that time frame? I'm just thinking that I'm looking at this both from a risk standpoint of why would we give them all this time and give them all those permits, and also I hear the staff issue, and so I'm trying to understand it. How does that benefit staff to give them until December of next year?
Director Thomas or Director Lennish, if you'd like to address that now, you may, or you can wait.
I can address it really quick. I don't think we're opposed to a shorter time frame. I mean, we're coming into the season where they're going to be able to get the park improvements done. So I think that would be an easy amendment.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, I'd like to see a specific recommendation from the land use committee. I think they're probably closest to this of any committee, and I think their agreement and recommendation would go a long ways.
Thank you. Councilmember Hogue?
I am still leaning towards how we felt during the land use committee meeting. And I feel like we need to tie something into being able to get the park done sooner rather than later. So I don't know what that means, but I'm still leaning towards not going with the higher numbers, so.
Councilmember Mercer.
Oh, you just went to mute.
You're on mute, Councilmember. Still on mute. Oh, there we go.
Okay, sorry about that. My speaker switched while we were talking. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of hearing both sides, and I am also kind of falling somewhere in the middle. I'm very cognizant of staff capacity. At the same time, you know, I understand Councilmember Naplin's sort of the impetus behind. I'm not necessarily about Toll Brothers sort of packing up and moving away. They're incentivized to move through and sell the units and build out as soon as possible. Yet at the same time, so my expectation is they will not necessarily, you know, drag out that time. So there's not necessarily a need to extend the window. At the same time, though, the staff's capacity is the staff's capacity. So I also don't want to overwhelm them. So I guess my general guidance is, you know, I would defer to some extent to the recommendations of the land use committee because they're closest to this. But also, you know, I want to be very cognizant of not creating a sort of a crisis or putting additional onus on staff to as a you know, the number of permits coming in, you know, accelerate beyond what they can handle. So, you know, I guess my general sense is I'm okay. I was okay with the proposal as put forward. But I will, again, sort of at the same time, if there was a mechanism to see the parks completed sooner rather than later, I'm also in favor of that. So, you know, Director Laniszewski, if you can come up with a, you know, an alternative proposal, working with Director Thomas, I would be open to that. But again, I didn't have any outstanding objections to the proposal that was put forward initially.
So yeah, one thing to note in the packet, right? We have a highlighted cell over the number that was drafted, and then a comment relative to land use committee's recommendations, and they gave a range. So I know we're comfortable on, sounds like lower numbers more so than what staff had proposed in discussions with the developer. But there's a range. Are we safe to say we take the higher part of the range? I don't like, I'm gonna, you know, 7. Like that's just a weird number. So I'm looking for a little more guidance. I can pull my screen up real quick if that helps. If some people didn't maybe see the full details on a couple of these bulleted items, but you know, Councilmember Naplin's hand is up too. So
Yeah, I'll just for the fun of it, I'll throw out a proposal that's actually maybe even a tiny bit higher than what we'd said in land use. What about 15 and 30, a total of 45 units, and change it from 6 and 9 to 4 and 6? That way it'll be done, you know, before the end of summer. I don't see any reason to extend it into the fall. So 15, 30 and 4 and 6 months. I don't know. It's just a compromise. I just wanted to throw it out. I feel like
no, that's great.
Something.
That gets the needle moving, and I think that's a little bit more than the land use committee in total recommended in this document. So most people were fairly amenable to deferring to that committee. So as long as the other two, I think you guys have 3, because some of us are down, are comfortable with Councilmember Naplin's numbers, we will probably be ready to set sail.
So it looks like this will go back to land use committee for a final council recommendation, and it sounds like council will go along with the land use committee's recommendation as presented at our next meeting. Unless I'm hearing differently, I'm assuming that that's the consensus that we've reached at this point, which is a good one.
Yeah, and I would say if the next meeting is the first, either we put it in there more in an advisory role to see where the numbers just fall out, and we kind of just sit that aside until we come back with the final plat, because they would be in conjunction with each other, just one before the other. Does that make sense? Okay. See a lot of heads nodding. Excellent.
All right, well, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to our last item of this evening, which is new business. Agenda Bill 22-12, contracts for architectural services for potential decision with Public Works Director Laniszewski.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. Steve Laniszewski, Public Works. 1 second while I reorient my screens. Agenda got a little jumbled. I think we make some hay here. Okay, I'll try not to stare too far to the left. Okay, so in the packet is the culmination of kind of ancillary work to the capital facilities review and work that is ongoing with ARC in light of, you know, police items that have been discussed over the last 10 months. The origination of both of these projects through the budgeting process in 2019 to adopt in the 2020 budget. Is that long ago? Oh my gosh. These two items have been discussed and shared over time. I think we have several items within this. One, of course, selecting an architect. Two, some items that are a little more hurried with current personnel changes inside the police department, as well as time waning on relative to state funds to be spent in those types of items. So I'll try to dig back a little. ARC has done a lot of work aside from their qualifications, right? They do know our needs. They have finished the reconnaissance work for all the investigatory part of their current project, which is helping them understand the two items between police and public works. As far as the needs, I think the police station's fairly cut and dry, right? We're trying to organize that facility in a way that provides accommodations for changing to be private, non-gender specific, and just all in all comfort level, and kind of changing around some space that exists that is quite large for the amount of staff that are on shift anyway. So that one's fairly simple in its cost, fairly simple in nature. And again, these folks can help provide the documentation to get us to bid. You know, the treatment plant is a little different in discussions with ARC on that facility. I can understand it seems a little, I guess, raw and vague, but the building is a footprint of, you know, half of 3550. Boom, it's or 3550 is a square foot. So the cost to do the work in there are relative to per foot costs. They know the general level of need as far as finish type. Nothing in there is out of the ordinary. I think most everybody has been to a city facility. None of them are anything to write home about. So this isn't necessarily in that vein, but it is, you know, comfortable space, stuff that is going to be flexible. Yes, there will be offices. Yes, there will be break room. Yes, there will be a conference room, which there is now, but reorienting it, we looked at, do we salvage, you know, one of the two garage bays? Probably not likely valuable enough per ARC's review. We will have, and I think maybe you guys recall the touchdown spaces, landing pods, that type of thing. There will be a large open area that will facilitate different changes in use types, accommodating offices, a permit center we have to accommodate because we're bringing planning, building, and engineering under one house. We still don't quite know if we orient that to the street, because on the second level you are at about grade with Main Street, so there is that to consider. They used fairly standard costs for developing those numbers, which I did insert into the agenda item. I think what we had initially begun, again, prior to 2020, was a $600,000 build and a $60,000 design. well, we've gone through 2 construction cycles and we've seen what that does. I am fairly, I mean, it may seem odd to folks, but of the $600,000 design, we're at about 805 for the building itself. So honestly, if you're looking at a 50% swing on preliminary work prior to contract, prior to design, prior to bid, you dwindle your way down on your percentages. We're within the envelope of 50% delta. The accommodations of the extra 100 are kind of ARC's anticipation of exterior improvements that maybe weren't considered before for access. If we do that change, so I think that's there. The fee, as noted in the agenda bill, of $165,514 just for the treatment plant offices. The majority of those costs are fixed. I think the fine details are a worst case, depending on, you know, minimizing walls. I know IT has talked about a server room and that kind of thing. So there are things that are fixed. The more detail we get, the more it will cost relative to what is proposed. So I think some of these wider used spaces are to be beneficial now to accommodate staff and in the future, you know, and some of the items we've been talking about with ARC, you know, yes, you know, we want to make sure we're spending money wisely, not just today, but for tomorrow. So, you know, I have asked ARC. Their impression is it is a good use of funds. The building will be utilized, kind of reading what they sent. The building will be utilized for future use. Also, the time it would take to design, improve, fund a new, you know, city building somewhere, some way for everybody is many, many years out. As the city does space plan, and let's say we all do go away, this is a great place for our crew to accumulate and accommodate on this property. You have the treatment plant and operations below. It would be a fairly private site should the crew be able to move down here, and it would utilize this building because it would have some flexibility on the interior, and it could hold seasonal employees as well. So I think space forever is certainly going to be something to consider, and we have considered. Certainly we'll have some more open office planning per their, you know, thoughts. Trying to, again, accommodate staff. You know, City Hall has 7 offices and 2 bullpen areas, housing, you know, 13 staff currently. We have 2 interns to find space for. We haven't even talked about, you know, whatever we do or don't get on LTEs. Public Works has 5 offices, 1 bullpen area, currently with 7 staff, 2 more budgeted, and intern. So there's not a lot of places in general. So I think, you know, hopefully, I know this is seemingly fast. I want to apologize if it seems that way. Again, you know, I've got half of a staffer now, kind of a full staffer. We'll have another PM starting in mid-March. We're trying to do this, but, you know, we're honestly, Public Works, myself included, managing the pandemic and losing staff on an every other weekly basis. It's quite a struggle to keep up. So I know ARC will be providing, they can't make the meeting on the 1st to talk about the big project. They will provide a report narrative for that meeting, and then they'll come to the soonest one they can thereafter, again, to talk about the big project, since they are tied in that sense. So I'm not sure what other notes I have as far as the office, but, you know, just in general, I think everybody's aware staff and space is at a premium, regardless of the pandemic, right? Even trying to pandemically navigate this, we have discovered, you know, the opportunity to work from home, flexible spaces. A traditional office isn't necessarily necessary all the time, so there are changes that we've all learned to adapt to, which I think are fantastic. I think a lot of the staff, some more than others, can get more work done remotely than maybe other folks, but some of us, you know, need an office or a space to work on city property. So I don't think the day of, you know, us not having an office are likely, but we are trying to be flexible. What we put together, again, for the packet was trying to be as matter of fact as we can, providing all the numbers. Those are updated numbers from the consultant. Those are not my numbers that were prepared, again, 2+ years ago. So we wanted to be as upfront as we could with what those expectations are. And with that said, I think I yield the floor back to the mayor for discussion. And the timeline is ASAP. We'd love to get this going now, one for the police and two for us, because we have state money to spend, as well as some of the bond proceeds are to be spent, and we just need to get back to work too and provide that upgrade to happen, because there's a lot to happen precedingly to that too. So hope that makes sense.
Director Laniszewski, real quick, I may have missed it. I was doing a little bit of multitasking here. You also talk about how many spaces we have now versus what we have with employees coming in the next several months. Okay, so I apologize if I missed that portion of, of the discussion. But that I just want to kind of reiterate that and highlight that for the group, is that we currently don't have enough office space for the staff that is here today, nor the staff that's coming in the near future. So just that's a really important point that I think should be clarified before we start discussion. So with that, Councilmember Schaefer.
Thank you. And Director Laniszewski touched on this, but just to reiterate, this facility, this particular building that I'm talking about, the wastewater treatment plant, is going to be with the city for a very long time. No matter what we decide to do with our downtown facilities, which we may eventually exit, we will still be in the wastewater treatment plant. By definition, we need feet on the street at that location, especially with a remodel. That building becomes a lot more versatile and useful for the city. So it's worth an investment for the future. As far as the police department is concerned, we approved a budget for that, which I think we're still within that budget, even with the I see some head shaking there, but I thought we were still within that budget, even with the most recent remodeling going in there. So and I realized that the budget did get increased for the wastewater treatment plant. And Steve, if you could just very briefly kind of give us the history of how we went from, and you touched on this, but how we went from $660,000 up to about $1 million. I think that would be useful for us all to understand.
Yeah, so again, the construction cost per square foot, the new number is 805 and change. I had 600 again with a 2-year-old now estimate. And then the design fee, I picked 10%. Obviously that seems relevant, but it is a little low based on what, we've worked on with ARC and some standardized fees presented in the agenda item. So all in all, we are over, of course, the 660 by a good amount percentage wise. I'd like to look at it separately with construction versus design. So we are over that, but yeah, I think there's a little more into the structural review. We've got some extra help, and then codes and all that for HVAC. There's a lot of intricacies now on all that. So part of that is a miss. Good news is I'm within the PDF you received today with the 2 total development cost tables and the page 3, which shows you the exaggerated costs from start to finish. We still fall within those envelopes, good or bad. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at, Mr. Schaefer.
Okay, no, thank you. And as we all know, that this, with the recent increase in services and inflation and just everything going up in price, that contributes obviously to construction and remodeling as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Schaefer. Mayor Pro Tem McHenry.
Yeah, thanks for explaining all of that. I know we talked about it in committee a bit. So I think the timing is good having art going through our facilities and just being able to get that extra perspective on the outside right now, that investing in remodeling this to, you know, accommodate more people and working through, obvious to me, the police department one is one that's been needed. So I just think it's good timing though, that we are able to just get that perspective from ARC about this facility in particular, the wastewater treatment plant. You know, and tonight we're just looking at the architectural design contract, and I think it's a needed first step to just keep this rolling. I don't anticipate anything getting cheaper in the future. So I support this moving forward, and I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And we didn't have any other hands up yet, but we've heard from Councilmember Mercer last on everything. So I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you're wanting to speak now, to get your thoughts out in advance. So thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. So Councilmember Mercer, one of the things I do like, I know there's, is always the balancing the investment in new capital projects versus, being able to leverage an existing building and increase utilization. I think, the comment that Councilmember Schaefer made in terms of the wastewater treatment plant is going to be with the city sort of in perpetuity. So it's, the likelihood of that property being salvaged in the future is very low. I think coupled with both the material supply chain issues coupled with just general inflation, does explain away, plus the fact that the prior estimates are 2 years old. So I'm relatively comfortable. I know, again, this is you're still looking through the numbers, particularly on the construction piece in terms of to tighten those up. But I agree with Councilmember McHenry. This is sort of the time to do it, and particularly with the pipeline of staff coming on board, the sooner that we can sort of validate directionally that it is the right facility and it's the right design, I think it makes sense to do it at this time. So thank you.
Thank you. And then Councilmember Langle, Hoag, and then Napland.
Good, my mute is on. I think I spoke very highly, in fact, I know I spoke very highly of ARC when the original agenda bill came in. Many years ago, I worked with them. Their reputation has never faltered. So I don't have a problem continuing working with them. I do have a couple of observations that I want to share. One is, and this is something we've talked about in the procurement committee, Steve's been part of those discussions. We really need to have a method that we've all agreed to on when we're going to touch base on these really important projects. I never assumed that we were not going to do the.
I apologize, Councilmember. I apologize, Councilmember. We should be speaking to the agenda bill at hand and not speaking.
I am. May I finish, please?
Process, the agenda bill is not, we have an existing process. You're speaking of future.
Well, I am getting to that, Mayor. And
Okay.
in the resolution, we specifically said the approval was to be including presentations to council. And I think that's a good thing. That's why I made that as part of the motion when we hired them to start with. Now, my question, I want to be sure I'm clear, is their Director Laniszewski said that we would be getting a presentation so that we could see where things were with the project. Was I correct? Was I correctly remembering that would be, did he say the first meeting in March? Is that what you said? That's your hope?
They cannot make the first meeting in March. He will provide
So
a
it'd be the
written
second.
report by then. But yes,
Okay.
he will try to get to the second meeting, which is the 15th.
Okay. And my second question is, do you consider these numbers that you're providing right now to be your preliminary cost estimate, and that you will be working within a 20% high or low cost range moving forward, or have you already built that into the numbers?
One other item too. So just on the ARC, right? As far as schedule, they did put it in writing. They are behind. They have had their own COVID issues. They had a pregnancy of their own, so they are trying to catch back up. And then yes, let me flip to those costs. I don't need that one. Too many maps open. So in the packet too, we worked on current market rate for the discipline types, right? Demo, interior, exterior, partitions, finishes, all that, HVAC, all that is a rate of relatively now $163 a foot. We've got 13% contingency on top. They did put, fee numbers in there, assuming, you're going to have bid numbers, which you won't see the fee bid, but you'll see it incorporated into, each line item of 20%. And then they did also put in another 6% escalator for construction cost indices increasing between now and time of construction. So yeah, that gets us to from a 163 per foot finish to 227, which is that 805 number. So I would expect we would likely be within the 20% envelope of that number. And again, that's today, right? So, and these are what I think hope folks like a little bit too. These aren't, staff's numbers of what we've seen happening. These are a consultant's numbers of what they are using. So I think they're probably more accurate. Plus the allowance for site development, parking access, and security they put in there, which we never contemplated prior. So that's another 100 on top.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then you consider where we are now, given that they've already been working on the building. We have not had an opportunity to see the results, but we will get to see those in March. So your assessment is that we are similar to a preliminary design point. We obviously are not where we were when the CIP was approved 2 years ago. So the escalation does not surprise me. Not proceeding, I've never felt that not proceeding with this project was possible. We have to do it. I think the first time I met with you directly, it was in your offices, and we both chuckled about how much space was in your office and how you needed that office for other people. So I'm completely supportive that way. But I do want to understand, because our job is money, and I want to make sure I'm understanding for the record that you feel that you're in that 20% plus or minus range moving forward, because we don't have infinite money, especially if we are looking at things like a new city hall. So I want to be sure you're comfortable that you're in that range.
I think their numbers are much more accurate than ours were provided before. And then one other point you kind of mentioned, that's one for ARC's not doing the design yet. They're doing an assessment of the city, right, and coming up with the capital facilities planning tool and the whole package, which they are done with all the data collection and site inspections and all that work. So they're ready to make sausage. They're just not making sausage yet. So that's separate.
Well, yeah.
You said, I just want to make sure
that's fine, because we didn't. Yeah, I mean, in the motion that I made, I didn't assume that they would be, designing the building yet. I just wanted to. I think we need to know where they are and how that relates to the money we've allocated, and that's the only reason why I'm speaking at this point, is because having a methodology where council knows when you're coming back on important projects, I think helps everybody. It lets you know when those benchmark points are necessary for us, especially when you want more money.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Langle. Councilmember Hoag?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm in favor of the agenda bill at hand. And I'm glad that you brought forward new numbers for us, as hard as it is to see them. And it's, I think our costs for construction are not going to do any, they're going to continue to go up. And that's just what's happening. Yeah. So we just got to go with it. This is an important project, both buildings. So I just, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. But thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoag. We have Councilmember Naplin next, and then Councilmember Schaefer does have his hand up for a second time. But I would also say that after Councilmember Naplin speaks, if council is ready to take a motion, you're welcome to make one as well. And Councilmember Schaefer's hands down, so to me, he's probably ready to go. So Councilmember Naplin, please proceed.
Yeah, I wanted to say before I start that I've been in support of investing in our facilities and know that we need some interim work before, some big capital facility, where we try to get everyone unified. I think that we're still a ways out for that. So I think there's always been an understanding that we needed to invest. When we were at the budget the last biennium, when we were going through that budget, it was kind of an awkward position because we were trying to do a government facilities plan, but also kind of already specifying we're going to spend here, on this building. And it was, one is kind of going to inform the other. How are we going to do this? And my understanding is that the government facilities plan would inform how we invest in the wastewater treatment plant remodel. And even when we got to the government facilities plan and we awarded it to ARC, there were some pretty specific provisions that we wanted a kickoff meeting with council. We wanted to have updates to council, and we wanted them to focus on beginning with the buildings that are housing employees, because we really wanted to get that information to inform how we proceed, because we have urgent needs to take care of our employees. I think everyone recognizes that. And so I think what was a little bit surprising is that the first I've heard anything since we have, really signed the contract with ARC is, budget has expanded and we want to sign a contract to design it. And I think it was pretty clear, and Councilmember Langle even mentioned that I think she might have made the motion, and within
I made the motion.
Yeah, and within that, she said, we need to reprioritize and have, council presentations and all of these things. And that was the expectation, that the scope would, once the final agreement was made with ARC, that the scope would reflect that desire of council to have the kickoff meetings, the presentations, and really use that process to inform how we proceed. So we are where we're at. We've had a lot of troubles with staffing, and I think could we go back and say maybe we could have done things differently? I hope we can reflect and realize that maybe this process didn't quite go how it was expected to go. So how do we move forward? I think for me, 660 seemed pretty low when it was presented. It would be great if we could have done it for that, but I'm not shocked that it's costing more. But what I would like to see is ARC to come back and present of their findings of the building and how this investment fits into the short, middle, and long-term capital facilities plan. And I think that was an expectation of that we would have gotten that. And now we're at a point where we really want to move ahead because the money has a time limit. So we're doing things a little out of order, but I still want that to happen. And I think it's reasonable to expect that piece happens. But it was what I understood when I voted yes for these things. And I voted yes on the budget that we would do this project. And when we voted on the awarding this to ARC, that this is how it would happen. So I don't know if in the motion today we can say, have ARC come back and share their findings, and maybe have the project come back at, I don't know what, 20, 50, whatever % on an architectural design, and just have an update for council. So I don't know if that's something that we can do to move forward, because it just feels like the process hasn't really happened in the way it had been expected to happen and communicated that it would happen.
I would say that's without reading the clerk's notes on the accuracy or inaccuracy of that statement, I would imagine you're pretty close to on what was to transpire. So yeah, honestly, my fault with, no PMs after September. We were just trying to get through the staff part of this. So, that will forthcome. I think I have the notes here on kind of those, how it fits. Again, the question I have asked Daniel with ARC is this a waste and does it fit from what you've seen? And the answer is not a waste and yes, it fits. So we will have them come back. I don't know how you want to memorialize that, but they know we want them to come back. I know you want them to come back. I will reread the notes obligatorily. I believe they are coming back. And I think, even the Public Works Committee could attest. I don't think we held the last 3 meetings in 2021 just because we were just scrambling to keep, things moving to the best of our abilities with what we had. So a lot of things did drop off, right, wrong, or otherwise. So.
Yeah, I just want to also point out Public Works, including Director Laniszewski, not only have been significantly understaffed and not able yet to bring on the new positions that were approved. There's been a lot of illness in the city overall in general. I think we're all aware of in general. It's that season. And when you don't have proper staffing levels and you have vacancies, things are not going to get done the way that folks want them to get done. And so I'll just put that as a highlight of this is another reason why this work is so important, is to make sure that we have proper facilities and for our staff, and that we're planning for the future and making sure that we have bench and depth within each department, so that when we do have vacancies and challenges that come up, they can be things can continue to move on. But there has been one heck of a lot of pandemic related work that Public Works, and particular Director Laniszewski, has had to do over the last several months that does not show on the surface and at council meetings, that has taken away from normal day-to-day Public Works operations as well. So if we're going to talk, it is off topic, and I am admitting that. If it wasn't brought up, I wouldn't have gone there, but I think that is something we all need to keep in mind. When things aren't happening as planned, there's a reason, and it's not because staff is intentionally doing things or not wanting to get things done. It's because they can't, or there's another issue that has come up. And so I just want to remind folks of that and ask council to provide our staff and our consultants some grace as we continue to try to move these really big things forward with very limited resources and challenging situations. So thank you. Councilmember Schaefer, did you want to speak again, or is council ready to make a motion?
I will speak again. Thank you. Let's see. It's my understanding then, and Director Laniszewski, I understand if there's extenuating circumstances, but as of right now, we think ARC to be able to come and give council an update in the mid-March meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, without confirming their calendar today, they said they couldn't make the 1st. Would be able to provide some narrative on the 1st for the packet, just to submit, and then they would see about getting staff to the 15th.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you very much. I think we'd all appreciate that. With that, I will make a motion on this to, I don't know if I can do them both at the same time, but I make a motion to suspend procedures, and we vote to approve AB 22-12 architectural design contract with ARC. And it's a reminder, we only are approving the architectural design piece at this point in time for services, services for the remodel of city wastewater treatment plant and police station locker room reconfiguration.
Councilmember Schaefer, is there a second?
I'll second the suspending the rules. I wasn't sure. Can we do a combined 2 motions in one, or do you have to individually vote on both?
I don't see why we wouldn't be able to. I think that's a smart way to do it. But I will defer to Clerk McMillan and Mr. Kenny if he's still on.
I think there's no reason why you couldn't. That's my opinion.
I agree.
Okay, then I second.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, for the record, I would like to note that Councilmember Nate Lingle has left the meeting. I'm not sure if it was an intentional or a technological issue, but we still have a quorum. So I will go ahead, unless there's further discussion, we will call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes unanimously. And with that, unless there are objections, we are adjourned at 9:08 p.m., still before 9:30. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.